Here.
Member List.
Here.
Okay, I haven't heard any requests to pull anything from a consent calendar. So,
Oh, we're at consent calendar? Okay. Move to adopt.
Seconds.
all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. That brings us to item 5. Do you concur, Commissioner Friend?
You're moving awfully fast. Yes.
I'm sure
We're
we'll
at
use
items
the time up later.
Items of interest to the public.
Okay. Okay, so this portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the commission on any matter not on the agenda this evening. The chair reserves the right to limit the speaker's time to 3 minutes. The chair will recognize the speaker and ask that they state their name for the record. Personal attacks on individuals or comments which are slanderous or which may invade an individual's personal privacy will not be tolerated. So, would anyone like to come to the podium and speak upon any items not on this evening's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to public hearings. Item 7.1. Andrew, could you report out to the
Point
commission?
of clarification.
Yes, sir.
We do have an item number 6 for communications, and
Oh, that's correct.
We do have
Yeah.
three communications. I want to
beg your
make
pardon.
you aware of. You should all have copies of them in front of you. First and foremost, going in order in terms of the agenda items tonight. For item 7.1, we did receive a letter of communication, public comment regarding that item, the Pleasant Street item on tonight's agenda, from Linda Telegan. It's a November 27th letter, 1 page. For item 7.2, tonight I received a handed copy of a 2-page document from Allison Loprich regarding, again, item 7.2 on tonight's agenda. That should look like this, with the top reading community care facilities. A third communication item is an informational document where staff received at the last Historical Advisory Committee meeting. One of our members lives adjacent to the former president of the I can't think of the name of it now. We'll go back to that. I'll talk about it during the item 8 of tonight's agenda. That's it for communications this evening, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for bringing that to my attention, Mr. Painter. So I guess now we can safely move into public hearings. And the first item is item 7.1, site plan review for the Morgan and Sandoval residence located at 2875 Pleasant Street. And does staff have a report on this?
I do. This site is located at the southeast corner of the intersection of Bedford Avenue and Pleasant Street. The home on the site is single-storied. It's a single-family home of approximately 1,300 square feet with 2 bedrooms and 2 baths with attached shed and outbuilding. The El Dorado County Assessor records indicate the home was constructed in 1906. A bay with a set of double-hung windows exists along the home's Bedford Avenue or west elevation, and along the Pleasant Street elevation is a pair of double-hung windows and a single double-hung window. These 5 windows are the subject of tonight's site plan review request. The authority under City Code for tonight's request is Section 1049 of City Code, the site plan review section, in that this project is located within the Bedford Clay Street Residential Historic District, and any request to alter the appearance of a building designated by council as historical or a building located within a historic district must first be reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission or City Council upon appeal before a building permit is issued. The site plan review ordinance does exempt minor repair and maintenance to buildings using same material and color. However, this request, as staff understands it, would not repair the existing window sashes, but replace them. It is this replacement that triggers site plan review. The criteria for evaluating proposed alterations to a city historic resource within the city is the Secretary of Interior Standards for Rehabilitation, as outlined under Section 10410, subsection B and F of the zoning ordinance. Also, the Commission would utilize the site plan review criteria, once again, of Section 1049 of City Code, as well as the City of Placerville Development Guide. Staff's review of the request, and it would appear that the request is consistent with the general plan goals and policies that are related to the protection and enhancement of Placerville's historically and architecturally significant buildings and sites and residential areas, as well as the maintenance of residential homes. Staff also feels that there is consistency with the general plan regarding applicable guidelines within the City of Placerville Development Guide, which is a document that was adopted by council in support of the general plan and is therefore consistent with criteria 8 of the site plan review ordinance, which requires all site plans to be compatible with the goals and policies established in the general plan. The exterior windows of the Morgan and Sandoval home help define the overall character of the building. Although the project would replace existing window wood sashes on site, the replacement material and finish in design, color, and texture will match those that are replaced. The request would therefore meet standards 2 and 6 of the Secretary of Interior Standards for Rehabilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic structures. Staff also reviewed the request for consistency and compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act and found it to be categorically exempt pursuant to Section 15301 as an existing structure, in that it involves the minor restoration and maintenance of an existing residence involving no expansion of use. The request came before the Historical Advisory Committee on May the 15th of this year, where they considered and then unanimously recommended that the Planning Commission approve the request. Public notice meeting city and state requirements was posted. As I mentioned earlier, there was one comment that was received from Linda Telegan, which we received on May 27th, which I provided to you prior to announcing this item. This comment, again, was provided to you this evening. The commenter raises questions regarding the site plan review requirement process. Now, based on staff's analysis, as discussed in staff's report, staff recommends the Commission adopt staff's report as part of the public record, make the findings A, B, C, D, and E on page 8 of staff's report, and approve site plan review 2014-03. Once again, it's a request to alter the existing single-family structure located at 2875 Pleasant Street, as described in staff's report, subject to conditions of approval 1 through 4 on pages 8 and 9 of staff's report. Mr. Chairman, a representative of the property owner is here this evening, and that concludes my staff report.
Thank you. Do any of the commission members have any questions for Andrew? Okay. Okay.
Well, I'll wait until the representative stands. Okay.
So I understand the representatives are here this evening and would like to speak to this. Please come to the podium and
Hi, good evening. My name is John Sandoval, and I am the resident at 2875. Unfortunately, Lisa Morgan, the other resident, could not be here this evening due to schoolwork. So I'm just here to basically what Andrew had said. We request that we replace 5 of the the window sashes at the property there, the ones facing Bedford and Pleasant Street. All materials will be consistent with the existing home and in texture and in color. And the main reason we're doing this is to save energy. It's just that the windows, I believe, were the originals, and they're just outdated, and we just waste a lot of energy.
thank you. Does any members of the commission have any questions, Mr. Sandoval?
Mr. Sandoval, the type of window you're putting in, is it going to be clear glass or is it going to be a tinted?
It is going to be a clear glass, and I believe that in that package there, what you see is the actual brochure from the Gen Weld windows. But yes, it is going to be clear glass.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Sandoval, and thank you for coming before the commission. I'm just curious if you did any research or exploration of restoration as opposed to replacement?
We did, and what we found is that it would be more costly in the shape of the windows that they're in now. It just wouldn't be cost effective.
Without asking for an exact dollar figure, can you give a relative comparison as to the cost for what you're doing versus what it would cost you to have them repaired?
Sure, of course. Cost of each window, anywhere from about $400 to $500 installed. To repair the window, to actually get the counterweights and all that reset, would be probably about $400 per
I'm sorry.
window.
That, unless I misunderstood, that was the exact same.
Well, just the fact that these will be more energy efficient, the new windows, that is.
Okay, so the cost, the replacement cost is about the same, replacement or repair is about the same, but the gain is in energy efficiency.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, just to add a note about the energy efficiency, I would suspect that the new windows are double pane and the old ones were probably single pane, and that's a huge step
That is
up,
correct,
you know,
yes.
I have a question. What about, is anything going to happen with the windows on the west side?
On the west side, which is facing,
Duffy Park,
I'm sorry?
facing the park.
Yeah, right now we are looking at it. It might not be in our budget this year. We have some plans for that side of the house, but as we discussed with Andrew earlier, when we sat down initially, we had a lot more work we wanted to do. However, our budget for this year only includes those windows, possibly the windows that are facing the park, but they would be the exact same ones.
Are you going to go with the no grid, just the same open glass panel?
Yes,
So
yes.
it's almost a like-kind replacement.
Exactly.
And then the other part of those older double-hung windows is drafts. You've got that open bay for the weights right next to the window, so drafts is the easiest way to cut and save on energy consumption there. But I applaud you for trying to keep the house very historic looking. I mean, it's beautiful. It's virtually intact with all of its original pieces. I mean, it's
Yeah, one of
very
the things I
beautiful.
was surprised on when Andrew had shown me the actual pictures from the 30s was the fact that it basically is the same,
Well, thank you for your efforts to keep it original.
of course.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sandoval.
Thank you.
This concludes the public hearing portion. Would like to bring it back and have any more questions for Andrew?
I just have a statement, a thank you. What an excellent staff report. Everything in there, everything from CEQA to general plan analysis, Secretary Interior. It's flawless. I mean, just use it as a template going forward. Excellent.
So, I just want to, Mr. Chairman, since we received some communication from a Ms. Telegan, and for the record, the communication is in support of the request, but she does bring up a secondary issue as to the level of effort that's required of homeowners, and I guess it applies to business owners as well, who find themselves in a historic district or owning what is deemed to be a historic property. And she raises the question as to why it's so difficult when someone is trying to achieve energy efficiency, and it really strikes an interesting issue, and the applicant was pretty forthcoming, and I appreciate the response to the questions that I had, in that the cost of either simply repairing the existing windows and restoring them to their original condition versus replacing the windows is about the same, which frankly I was a little bit shocked to hear. The energy efficiency makes perfect sense, whether it's double pane, triple pane, et cetera. It's a no-brainer there, and it does kind of put us in a bit of a difficult position with trying to retain the historic integrity, and at the same time, we have to acknowledge that the requirements in some way are limiting or restrictive to the property owner. In other words, an individual owns a piece of property, yet these conditions are put on them when they, in fact, may or may not know. And where I'm going about in this roundabout rambling, for which I'm well known, is to staff and to my fellow commissioners, do we want to have a staff report or some other acknowledgement as to why we make folks go through this amount of effort? It's not because the city is looking for money or we're attempting to micromanage. There's a balance that we're attempting to strike between maintaining the historic character, as well as allowing homeowners to do what they want to do with the property. And I'm just, from a customer perspective, customer service perspective, and an image perspective, if we need to spend some time, not this evening, but in a subsequent meeting, just addressing this topic so that it's clear to the public, why we do the things we do and why we require the things that we require, particularly in the historic district. I just wanted to acknowledge the issues that she raised in her letter on this item. So.
Yeah, I want to concur with Member Friend. I think what might be an efficient way to proceed would be to collect input like this and decide at some point when we have enough issues, more than this one issue, but enough issues to, first of all, determine if a pattern exists or what patterns exist, and also enough of a chunk of work that would rise to the level of whatever you want to call it, a tiger team, maybe open it with a community chat, all of those things that have worked successfully in the past. But I'd say the next step would be to continue to observe what's coming in and what opinions we're seeing, and then decide if we want to proceed with that.
I'm kind of have a problem with the application fee level, and what about, we want to encourage people to restore and replace, and at some point would somebody just say that's too much? If they wanted to replace just trim, they technically would have to go through this whole system, and I don't know if city council would consider a percentage fee up to the $400 or extended payments, or I just would like to encourage more restoration than not.
I guess it's just a coincidence, but I called Andrew this afternoon and asked him about this very topic. Why couldn't this have been handled maybe just over the counter? If the building isn't going to change visually and no one's going to know that the new windows were even there, I would think that unless there is a visual change or a chance for that these kinds of things could be just handled administratively at the department over the counter. And maybe you can research it with, and to see if that's possible. Maybe there's ordinances or statutes that preclude that, and maybe it has to be this way. But if we can make it simpler and more economical for the applicant, I'm all in favor of that.
Thanks to all of you gentlemen. Well, are we at the point where we can entertain a motion?
I'll yield to my commissioners on the right.
I did forget to ask the applicant a question about retaining the original screens, but okay, I have not made a motion yet.
And actually, I hadn't, you just reminded me of another question. Since these are going to be replaced, I'll ask to those of you that may be knowledgeable in the building trades, is there any value in the old windows, the historic, using them some other way And so I don't know, Mr. Sandoval, would you mind coming back to the podium? If it's a pleasure of the chair, I'd like to ask this question.
Yeah, actually, we were researching that, and there's probably a minimal profit to be made from that, just from collectors and/or some art dealers that take those old windows and turn them into artwork. We saw some down at the El Dorado Hills Festival about a month or so ago. But unfortunately, not as much as replacing it with the new windows.
Sure, and I wasn't actually going to put that burden on you, and I appreciate you having some knowledge on that. I hate to see those things go to either the landfill or even through the recycle process, but do you know if the window company has a process for doing that? I mean, you know, you're right, they could become artwork or they could be used for historical preservation in some
Exactly.
other...
Our plan at this point is to keep the windows, and at some later date, kind of figure out what we want to do with them. But yeah, we're not going to recycle them through the window company or the supplier.
Okay, all right, thanks.
And as far as the screen goes, these actually have roll-down screens that are incorporated in the actual units that we are also going to incorporate into the building.
Okay, so the screens that are there, you plan on removing?
Yes.
I would just encourage to recycle them.
Yeah,
You
and
find
again, that's
somebody-
going to be the same part because of the types of screens that they are. Yes.
Because somewhere out there, somebody's screaming for your window frames that you're replacing. So.
We'll send them on over.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, what occurs to me is an organization like Habitat for Humanity and their reuse facility down in, was it El Dorado, I guess? Yeah, they might be happy to have them. They also make pretty good cold frames. So I think where we were is Commissioner Friend was going to construct a motion.
You know, if you guys keep asking me to do this, then you don't get on the bike, you're not going to learn how to ride. I'm happy to go ahead and make a motion approving the staff's recommendation to approve. Let me see, I wasn't prepared to make a motion, but now I will. We adopt the staff report as part of the public record, make the findings of fact as established on page 8 of the staff report, Roman numeral 2A through E, and that we approve site plan review 2014-03, which is a request to alter the existing single-family dwelling located at 2875 Pleasant Street, as described in the staff report, with the conditions of approval 1 through 4 as stated therein.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Andrew, will you take a roll call vote?
Member Friend.
Yes.
Member List.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Vice Chair Drobish.
Aye.
Chair Lowry.
Aye.
There is an announcement that this action is appealable within 10 days. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
The next item, I have to recuse myself. My wife and I own property within 500 feet. I really hate to miss this one, but but unfortunately I have to, so.
Thank you, Member Russell. Well, this brings us to item 7.2 regarding a conditional use permit 2014-03 for a residential treatment facility at 2986 Coloma Street. So for this background, property owners Tim and Ellen Page request a conditional use permit for West Slope Recovery Incorporated to operate a 10-bed residential treatment, drug and alcohol facility within the existing two-story single-family residence. The facility would operate and be staffed 24 hours per day. It would serve men only. No changes to the exterior of the building are proposed with this request. Plan changes to the site involve the addition of a fence along the south property boundary that adjoins US 50 right-of-way to reduce traffic and noise in the front leisure area. So, Mr. Painter, would you care to elucidate on this topic?
Sure, I do have a staff report for you. This site is is zoned R16000H or R16H, which stands for Single Family Residential, a 6,000 square foot minimum parcel, and it resides within the historic district of the Coloma and Spring Street Residential Historic District. It is primarily a residential neighborhood consisting of single-family, multifamily, and a boarding house, but it also includes a church across the street from the site on Coloma, as well as 2 bed and breakfasts that are located within a block of the site. According to El Dorado County Assessor records, a one-story 960 square foot commercial office building containing 2 offices was constructed with a 960 square foot carport underneath back in 1964. In the late 60s and mid 70s, the carport area was enclosed to create additional office and storage space. In 2010, the property owners, Tim and Ellen Page, requested and received conditional use permit approval to convert the commercial building into a residential use, which is now a 5-bedroom, 3-bath, single-family home. That permit was finalized in April of 2013. As you mentioned and summarized in the agenda summary, Tim and Ellen Page are requesting a conditional use permit for West Slope Recovery to operate a 10-bed residential treatment, drug and alcohol facility within the existing 2-story single-family residence. The facility would be operated and be staffed 24 hours per day. It would serve men only. There are no changes to the exterior of the building as proposed with this request tonight. In 2010, the zoning ordinance was amended to add definitions for transitional and supportive housing, as well as an emergency shelter. And these were done to allow for transitional and supportive and emergency shelter uses within city code, which was required by state law for all local governments to incorporate those changes into state law. One of these changes involved defining the types of transitional and supportive housing as a subtype of what's called a residential care facility, which characterizes the request tonight. It is interesting to note, however, that under state law, if you have 6 beds or fewer in a residential care facility, those are permitted by right in any residential zone. The request tonight, again, is for 10 people, 10 residents, which under our code would require a conditional use permit to be issued before it could begin operations. Now, the commission will recall that at a recent Planning Commission meeting, staff brought before you some additional changes in response also to Senate Bill 2 that I briefly talked about earlier as it relates to this type of housing in multifamily zones. Now that your action that you took last meeting, that has not gone yet to City Council, but just for frame of reference, I wanted to point that out. Now, under the zoning ordinance, the Planning Commission is authorized to act upon all conditional use applications, and they are authorized to issue a conditional use permit upon making findings that the requested use is deemed essential or desirable to the public convenience or welfare, is in harmony with the various elements or objectives of the general plan, and is not detrimental to surrounding property. Staff's evaluation of the request as it relates to parking first. Parking for the proposed use as shown in the site plan prepared by the project applicant, the Pages, shows that there are 6 existing paved parking spaces on site. City parking regulations do not specify minimum parking standards for this particular use. However, we do specify parking regulations for the similar uses, such as rest homes, convalescent hospitals, etc. And the ratio in the parking regulations for those uses is 1 parking space for each 3 employees and 1 space for each 3 residential beds. The 6 spaces on site would appear to exceed the parking minimums for the 10 residents that are proposed under tonight's request. As the facility will have 1 employee on site at all times, there is a possibility of a potential overlap of staffing as the shifts change. But as stated in the applicant's application materials, that they will restrict and prohibit the having of vehicles by residents who occupy the facility. In terms of traffic generation, it is clear based on the intent of the applicant to restrict the use of vehicles to really members of the staff only, and perhaps visitors who may come to see people who are residing at the facility. There is a highly likelihood that there will be no change of level of service on Coloma Street, the off-ramp off of US 50, High Street, or Conrad Court or Way. Staff's review of the request found that it is categorically exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, and thus this project is consistent with the applicable general plan designation and policies, as well as applicable zoning designation and regulations. The development occurs within the city on a project site that is less than 5 acres. The site has no value as habitat for endangered, rare, and threatened species, and the site is served by all required utilities and public services. Staff has received 4 comment letters regarding this request. Those were made as part of Exhibit B of staff's report. They are from Celeste and Bob Hill, Pat Nash, Lee and Susan Block, and Allison Lopridge. I also made reference earlier this evening about an additional correspondence which was provided to you this evening, also from Allison Lopridge. I did see her in the audience this evening. Perhaps she will address that document during public comment. On June 15th of 2014, May 15th of 2014, the Historical Advisory Committee considered this request, and it's charged to advise and make a recommendation to the Planning Commission with respect to the conditional use permit request and the appropriate means, if applicable, to maintain the historic integrity and the resources in the historic district. The Commission unanimously recommended that the Planning Commission approve the request as presented. The committee further found that the request would not affect historic resources within the Spring and Coloma Street Residential Historic District. Staff recommends the Commission grant approval of CUP 2014-03 by taking the following action: adopt staff's report as part of the public record, make the findings A through D on page 7 of staff's report in support of conditional use permit 2014-03, and conditionally approve the request incorporating conditions 1 through 6 on page 8 of staff's report. Mr. Chairman, the project applicant representative is in the audience this evening, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Andrew before the public comment period?
In the handout that was given at the beginning of the meeting, the first page, the 1,000-foot rule to other existing community care facilities, how do you see that?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, Treehouse Ministries is operating across High Street there. Do they operate as any kind of care facility? What kind of category are they operating
If they
under?
are 6 or fewer, the city treats them as a single-family residence.
But it is a residential care facility
I
under
do not
these
know that for fact.
definitions. Okay. So you don't know anything about it because it's just over the counter,
I do not.
by right?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, you may want to remind the audience that we are in deliberate or discussions with staff, and that the public will have an opportunity to address the commission.
Well, there you go, what he said.
Sorry. And we appreciate everyone being here, and it may be a long evening, but we kind of have a process that we go through at this point. We're directing our questions to staff, and then the chairman will open it up for public hearing, and everyone will have an opportunity to speak.
I do have another
Sure,
question from Mr.
if they do exist, then this site would appear to be within 1,000 feet.
Do you, for this property, they're going for another conditional use permit. The other one from, I believe, 2010, was that was for the conversion of commercial to residential.
Right, they've met those conditions.
Do you know of any other conditional use permit that still runs with this piece of property?
No.
Okay.
I just want to, Mr. Chairman, so I just want to, for the record, at first I thought this was provided to us by staff, but this was actually provided to staff for the commission by members of the public. Okay, so correspondence technically and.
Correct.
Okay, and I think we did mention this as correspondence in the
Correct.
communications section, but, okay, so, and so your assessment of the relevance of this document is it may, the mapper may or may not be accurate, and there may or may not be treatment facilities that, or other facilities relevant to the zoning ordinance in terms of the 1,000 feet. Staff just doesn't have the information to know one way or the other.
I do not believe that there are any that are licensed. And if they are unlicensed, and once again, if they are 6 or fewer in a residential home, then they do not require any conditional use to the city as stated under state law. So I'm not aware of any licensed facility within 1,000 feet of this location.
Okay, so, and so we just addressed this in previous commission meetings and sent a recommendation to council for adoption. And so some of the, at least for me, it's kind of new. I'm just trying to make sure I understand. So even if I have a CCF that has 6 or fewer individuals, that's allowed by right in any zone, and including a residential zone.
Could I?
Yes, correct me.
No, I'm not correcting you.
Okay.
I think I want to say that that's true. The way the code reads today, in a residential zone, in all of our residential zones, your statement is correct. What came before you recently was a change to the code because we have other zones in the city that are not technically residential.
Correct.
They are mixed use. They
Right.
allow for residential uses. And
Right.
typically, one example would be this zone, where this building's located, which is called Central Business District, where residential uses are permitted above and below the ground floor. Well, we consider that type of zoning district as a mixed use. And so what came before you recently was a modification to the zoning ordinance to allow this transitional and supportive housing within those zones that permit residential uses that subject to the same standards of other residential uses in that same zone.
Okay.
So there is a distinction. This particular property of subject tonight is a residential zone.
Okay.
The code permits 6 or fewer for this type of use by right. 7 or more requires a conditional use permit, and that is the nature of tonight's request.
Okay, and I noted, who did the underlining in this doc? Was it provided this way to us?
It was I had not a chance
Okay,
to
so,
read the document.
So I'm going to make an observation, then I have a question for you, and I'll be quiet, which everyone on this panel knows is not worth much, because then I usually have something else to ask. The 1,000, there's an underline, the very last sentence on this cover page is underlined, the 1,000 feet distancing between CCFs with 6 or fewer people is therefore not constraining the development of CCFs within the city. So it doesn't really matter if there are other CCFs near this facility, as long as they have 6 or fewer, that won't constrain what happens with this particular proposal, depending on how we go with the request to be greater than 6, 7 or more. Is that fair
I
assessment?
think I understand your question. Yes,
Okay.
that's true.
And then the other question I have is, since we've made recommendations to council for a zoning ordinance change which have not been approved yet, the current zoning is what applies tonight, not what we've recommended to council, because that hasn't been adopted yet, correct?
Again, what you recommended to council relates to mixed-use zones and not
Right,
the
okay.
residential zones.
Yeah, thank you, okay. And that's probably what you just said a moment ago, and I'm trying to process all this. All right, I yield.
How is the 6 or fewer beds in a residential structure calculated? Is it by square footage, by bedroom, or is there none? Could it be-
Residential occupant.
So there could be 6 beds in a 1,000 square foot residence, or 6 beds in a 10,000 square foot residence?
Yes.
Okay, it's just once you go over that threshold of 6, then you have to go through the CUP process.
Right. You could look at it from your own perspective. In your house, if you had 6 people residing in one of your bedrooms and nobody else resided in any other bedroom or any other room in your house, technically that would still be a single-family home. And if the residents were considered transitional or supportive, that would be consistent with the zoning ordinance. I hate to use that kind of personal example, but I think that kind of illustrates what could happen.
Are there state health and safety regulations on how many people can occupy a square foot of a bedroom? Can you put 12 people in a bedroom?
Well, you would need to define what, the size of a bedroom. I'm not have access to those codes to give you that answer tonight, but.
I wouldn't want to approve something that's violating something I don't know the standards
Yeah,
of.
I'm not sure it's relevant tonight. I think you've seen the floor plan from the applicant's perspective, and it clears that he shows beds that are proposed and where they're to be located. There will be some review by the city to make sure that there's adequate clearance around the beds, that there's egress that's appropriate for this type of occupancy. So in that sense, there will be some evaluation should this use go forward and should it become operational.
Thank you.
Well, now we've reached the public hearing portion, and I'd like to ask the applicants to come forward and speak to this application. State your name for the record, sir.
My name is Tim Page. I'm a recovered alcoholic addict. I've been clean and sober since December of 2008, going through the VA and a residential treatment facility very similar to the one I'm presenting to you tonight. I'm a disabled veteran, joining the Navy in 1978 and getting an honorable discharge in 1984. I'm also vice president of the Juvenile Service Council in Placerville, another nonprofit, a position I've held for the last 3 years. We go into the Placerville Juvenile Hall twice a month, showing the kids there is someone who cares about them. I'm a regular Thursday night volunteer dishwasher at the Upper Room on Broadway, and have been doing that for the last 3 or 4 years. The reason I'm telling you this is to let you know I'm a product of recovery. I found a solution to my disease and took the steps necessary to stop the insanity. I'm passionate about recovery, and it shows to the people I talk to and work with every day. I'm giving back to the community in ways that affect me personally, and I'm showing the new men in recovery what it's like to be a productive member of society. I retired in January of this year, and West Slope Recovery is my avocation. I haven't drawn a dime of salary, nor do I plan on drawing any salary in the future. No one in our nonprofit organization has drawn a salary since we started this venture a year ago. This is not a money-making proposition. I'm here tonight, as you know, to follow up on the application to increase the capacity of our building from 6 to 10 beds and to clarify our intent. Our intent is to open a 10-bed, non-medical, social model residential substance use disorder treatment program. This will fill a need in the community and allow us to cover the cost of operations and possibly develop a small prudent reserve to expand elsewhere in the future. We have been asked if we will be opening a women's program by many in the community, and our response is yes, we will when we have the funds. We have been focusing on getting licensed and certified by the state of California so we can get up and running. The reason for the request to increase the bed capacity from 6 to 10 are many. Our program director's 17 years of experience has shown that the monthly average of a 6-bed facility will be 4.5. Here are some of the reasons. Residents enter and leave at different times of the month, and their stays will vary. Some residents will be exited early because they really don't want to change their lives or they violate the rules. This interrupts the next scheduled arrival and results in empty beds. Some residents scheduled to enter the program may be declined due to licensing and certification requirements or have become inappropriate for receiving services from us at their scheduled time of entry. For these reasons and others, there will be empty beds which will reduce the resident monthly totals to an average of 4.5 at a 6-bed facility. This average will make it a struggle to succeed and develop a reserve. Increasing the capacity to 10 beds would increase our average occupancy to about 6.5. This greatly increases our ability to support the need of the community and our financial viability. Our intent is twofold. One is to open West Slope Recovery with 10 beds, as I said, and as I said, better serve the community and increase our ability to succeed. The other is to be a good neighbor. I've had some contact with our neighbors and heard their concerns, such as the possibility of increased crime and a reduction in property values. I have with me copies of a report from throughout the United States and Canada, all stating that there is no correlation between treatment programs and an increase of crime. In fact, one study states that there had been a decrease in crime around treatment programs after the opening of one facility, but was unable to cite the treatment program as the cause for the decrease. One of our concerned neighbors requested a fence be built to block the view of our yard. Our board has met and approved the building of the fence, and I have gone to the city and gained their approval. I want to make clear to this committee and our neighbors that ours is a structured program and the residents will not be allowed to be off the property unsupervised. This is for the safety of the residents and the program. We have developed strict rules for our program, and we know from experience that our residents need to be held to them and the consequences from violations. Our staff are held to certification standards, and both volunteers and staff are held to our code of ethics. The staff and volunteers will have consequences up to and including termination for violations of these standards. Should a resident be found in violation of a rule resulting in their exit, it is our program's policy to hold an individual until they can be exited safely. Our residents will not be dumped on the sidewalk in the middle of the night. Residents will be transported back to their families or referral source to ensure safety for the individual, the program, and the community. We are mandated to our staff, any crime witnessed by them shall be immediately reported. In conclusion, our intent is to be an asset to the community and the individuals we will be serving. Thank you for taking the time to consider our proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Page. I'd like to ask you to remain at the podium for any possible questions from other members of the commission. Member Friend? No?
I actually have quite a few questions, but I'll yield to my fellow commissioners.
Okay. Member Drobish?
I have a question. You just mentioned that the residents would not be allowed to be off property unsupervised, and you're going to have one staff member at any given time?
At least one.
Okay. So then I'm just kind of thinking they might start to feel a little cooped up if they're in bunk beds in a room in a small little gathering area out front. What's going to keep them from getting cabin fever?
Well, we have a little area out front they can go to. We've got a large dining hall. We've got a day room with a television. I don't know the answer to that question.
Do you take the residents to events or to places?
Typically, what would happen, the transportation we would give to them would be to go to AA or NA meetings. You know, there's 2 a week in the Episcopal Church right across the street from us. There's about 10 a week in the senior center. we would transport them to any kind of CPS event they had to go to. I don't know if event is a good word. Possibly court, hospital, any of that stuff. It's, when they're in here, they're not in here to be going off to events and doing things. They're in here for treatment. It's like going to a crash course in recovery.
And then it looks like there's basically a community kitchen.
No, all the cooking will be done by staff.
Okay, so they won't be out going to the needing to go to the grocery store and come
Absolutely
back
not.
with no transportation?
No, we supply everything,
Okay.
everything. They come in there literally sometimes with paper clothes.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I have a couple questions. One of the things I noticed as I'm reading through some of the comments from people was the idea of how can you assure your neighbors that there's going to be staff 24 hours a day? And at this point, you have 6 in your facility right now. Is that correct?
No, we have room for 6. We
You
don't have
roo-
6
okay,
in there now.
You have room for 6. You average about 4.5 a month. Is that,
I haven't really done the averaging on that. The averages that I gave you is from my program director, who's been. That's true. There is a little confusion here. What we're talking about with the people that in there now and what we're proposing, it's an entirely different business. We have transitional living people in there now. They come and go, they have jobs, they pay rent. What we're proposing, when we get off the ground, we have to be licensed and certified with the state of California. We have to have the fire clearance. We have to have all that in place before we ever even apply for a contract or get anybody in there to treat them. All of our staff is certified, they're licensed. We're required by law, by the California, the restrictions that we have, that the state put on us, require us to have staff 24/7 on site.
okay?
Our client-to-counselor ratio is 5 to 1.
Client to counselor ratio is 5 to 1. I'm a board member. I'm not the
Okay.
intricacies of that. I'm not going to be running the program. I'm going to be around. I have the staff that we're going to hire to come in there is going to be taking care of it.
And I want to mention, Mr. Page, is that if you'd like your colleague to join you at the podium to clarify these points.
Perfect.
And I really, no, I wasn't intending on putting you on the spot. I just, so anyway, for the record, would you state your name, sir?
David Olson.
Thanks, David. So with that said, let's carry on with you being lead, Mr. Page. And if you need a lifeline, then David's standing there right next to you.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask, Mr. Olson, was it? Just, are you like the operations manager, or what is your role in the organization?
I'll be the program director.
Commissioner, are you finished? No. Did you? No, exactly, yes.
Okay, so you've had a facility that you could, up to this point, have a maximum of 6 people transitional living. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's up
Okay.
and running at this. We're licensed by the state of California for that.
Okay. Now, you're talking about one attendant 24 hours a day, plus you're talking about cooks. What other staff members would be there on a typical 24 hours? Give me a rundown on how this works. I'm sorry, I'm ignorant when it comes to this.
During the day shift, there'll generally be 2 counselors to cover groups, phones, interviews, and one-on-ones. During the evenings, we will try to, we will be accessing volunteers in the community who support us to cover the shifts in the evening and the swing shift. And then staff will return in the morning, paid staff will return in the morning.
Okay, that sends up a red flag with me. What happens if Volunteer Joe doesn't show up? What do we do?
Then I would be there.
Then you'd be there,
then I would be there.
okay?
Or another board member would be there.
So, first of all, Mr. Page, I want to start my questions to you by saying your personal story was quite compelling, and congratulations for your sobriety and the challenges that you've overcome. And I, appreciate your passion for this kind of project and what you're doing. Having said that, there are a number of questions that I have, and I think concerns that we have to deal with that hopefully we can resolve and flush out this evening. I'm going to go back. These are not in any order. There's my random questions as I've gone through the report and listened to the presentations. So again, coming back to the staffed 24/7. So my first question was by who? Now what I understand is during the day you'll have official individuals and then volunteers to take care of the off-duty shifts. And I do share the Commissioner List's concern about that level of control, as it were. Earlier in your remarks, you indicated that no, I will call them residents, I think, is that an appropriate term, resident of your facility? Yes. No resident will be able to leave or go outside unsupervised or by themselves. But if we have 10 folks there, then I don't understand how we'll be able to accomplish that.
Well,
Did I misunderstand? So, I mean, let's say, we won't say that everybody wants to go all at one time, but let's say 6 of the folks want to go, and I don't know where they would go and what they would do. They're voluntarily there. They're not under confinement per se. So, do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, I think
Okay.
I can clear that up for you. Depending on the vehicle that we have for this project, and right
Vehicle,
now,
you're not meaning a vehicle, you don't
the
mean automobile, you're using that as,
yes,
okay.
the automobile we have for this
Oh,
project.
okay, I'm sorry, yeah.
We will have a set number of clients, residents, that can go somewhere at night, say an AA meeting. So if we have a vehicle, an automobile, that holds 5 people total, only 4 residents can go that night.
Fair enough, I'm sorry, but can people just walk out the door and then walk down the street?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, so
They
there
can
is-
walk out the door and be on our compound, but they cannot leave our property unsupervised. If they leave our property unsupervised, they're going away.
And they have to have permission, to leave because they have to have the supervision.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate if the audience, everyone in the audience is going to have an opportunity to speak, but it's critical in order for this body to make a good decision that we flush out as many of these issues as possible. So please, I'll ask you to be respectful of the discussion. In your diagrams, one of the reasons I think the Historical Committee had no issues with this is because no alterations, exterior alterations are being proposed. And while I appreciate the Historical Committee's review of the project, it really doesn't come into play because everything's happening on the inside. And unless I miss something, really the only difference I'm seeing in the proposed versus existing is the additional beds that are being placed in the rooms, unless I miss something.
No, that's correct.
Okay, you're requesting 10, capacity of 10, but where do the staff stay?
In one of those 10 beds.
That doesn't make any sense to me.
That's the way the licensing requires
Okay,
it to
so
be.
if that's the case, then I would think, and I'm just going to throw this out to my commissioners, if that's the case, then we would have to, at a minimum, designate 1 bed or location for a staff member, which would mean the capacity would actually be 9 or less. I'm just throwing that out there because we cannot have, it doesn't seem to me that we could permit you for 10 residents plus the staff. It's got one or the other. So, but just, you answer my question in that where the staff would stay overnight would be in one of these 10 beds as provided in the diagram. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you've asked, I had a question by why 10, and your answer to the 10 was really to keep your average up based upon the ebb and flow of residents through the facility. What's the age group that's permitted? Is that a state requirement or state parameters?
18 to 64.
This is an 18 to 64 group, and it's all male in this particular facility. What is the typical duration of the stay?
It'll vary, but generally 30, 60, 90 days, depending on the individual, the funding, and their progress.
The individual what?
The individual's funding and their progress and participation in the groups.
Okay, and I want to reconcile that response with, this is an intensive treatment, and so I guess I anticipated with an intensive treatment that it was very specific, very precise. You came in and it was boom, 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 and then you go out, but you're saying it really isn't that way. And I can understand because everyone's different, has different needs. So it can go up to anywhere from 30 to 90 days?
Correct.
Okay. You raised funding, and I was going to ask how you're funded then. Is this through an insurance base, or is it individual pay? How is the funding taken care of?
Well, for the last year, it's been funded out of Hip National Bank, about 90 days, which means out of our pocket. In the last 90 days, we raised about $13,000 through a online crowd tilt. I don't know if you're
Sure.
familiar with that.
Sure.
We put that out there.
Sure.
We sent it to our friends and family. We were hoping to raise about $60,000 or $70,000 so we could get a large facility somewhere in El Dorado County. That didn't pan out. So our funds were set at a level. The only place we could truly go is a property that I happen to own.
I understand.
That's the reason we're here tonight.
Okay, and I understand, and I kind of anticipated that. And again, forgive the directness of my questions, but is it safe to say that the funding isn't necessarily stable for this operation? You want it to be, but it isn't necessarily stable.
Right now, it's not stable because we have to get licensed and certified, which
Okay.
requires the conditional use permit, the
Yes,
fire
sure.
department.
Sure.
Once we get licensed and certified with the state, which is another $6,000, at that point in time, when we're licensed and certified, then we can apply for contracts and we can open our doors to private pay individuals. We can't get anybody in until we get that
No,
license and certification with the state.
I completely understand how that works. But then at that point, it's going to be up to the individuals. Your residents will have to pay.
Absolutely.
They're the ones to be paying to go. Okay, so again, forgive the directness of my questions. Referrals, how are individuals referred to your facility?
Well, they'd be referred from other clients. You could tell your friend that you knew a place for his son.
Okay. But they're not professional referrals per se?
They could be.
They could be, but not
Absolutely.
exclusively.
Once we get licensed and certified, then we're in the system, so to speak.
Okay?
And, wow, Placerville, I want to go there and get recovered.
And we
Sure.
can advertise in general ways, but we would be working.
Please? Okay.
We would be working to establish contracts with El Dorado County, Placer County, to gain referrals from them, and the VA. We're going to, work with them to get contracts with the VAs to help the veterans in our county, and then, referrals from family, friends, and self-referrals, people that know us and know of our existence.
Right. So that kind of segues into another question. So then the state licensing and certification, can you speak to it all about quality control and compliance and standards and best practices for the operation of a facility like this?
I can speak to it. I don't have it in front of me. It's a part of the development of policies and procedures that is required by the state of California to cover quality care, quality insurance, to develop an ongoing plan where the board of directors do overview of what we're doing monthly, and me as program manager, I report to them, and I do staff evaluations regularly and trainings, and identify problems. Part of our, we have a safety code that when we're walking through that we should be looking for hazards, future problems, deterioration of steps, wood, and things like that. I have it in the policies and procedures. I can provide that for the committee in the future.
You're presently licensed or certified, I'm not sure what the correct term is, by the state for what you're doing right now?
Tim is licensed as Coloma House through the CAR board that is recognized by the state of California. He is certified to do transitional living through
Certified
that.
by the state?
No, the state doesn't certify transitional living.
Okay.
The state recognizes the CAR board to certify his facility, and he has gained that certification to provide transitional living. Transitional living is not treatment.
Okay,
It is
right.
just a residence.
Okay, all right, so the treatment is an up higher level, a next level?
Yes.
And so you've had there have been no site visits or inspections or review by the state because they don't?
No, but the CAR board has come out to review his facility before they would authorize a certification.
Okay, and I promise I'm almost done, Mr. Chairman, so you can go to the rest of the public. But, so let me ask, just another couple really, really direct questions. You understand the concerns neighbors may have?
Absolutely.
You understand the potential impact on surrounding property values from this type of operation?
So to speak, I do. We've owned that building for 12 years. We've we've owned it next to Ridgeview Manor for the last 12 years and put up with that for 12 years.
And, please. So let me rephrase that question. You understand the potential impact on value for what you're proposing as opposed to what you're presently doing?
I understand the impact, and the studies that we have, that we brought here tonight, show that there should be no decrease in homeowner value.
And what guarantees can you give the neighbors as to a maintenance of their quality of life and a maintenance of their property values should this commission approve the requests that you brought?
I can't, there is no possible way I could guarantee that. All I can guarantee is what I brought here tonight and my assertion that that property is going to be kept up in a way that's unsurpassed. I mean, I don't know, I know one of you, the commission board or the board members, has been by there to see it. I don't know if anybody goes up there at any time, but the improvements in that corner of our world have just been phenomenal in the last 3 years.
Okay. I actually have one more question I just thought of, and then I am finished. So you're requesting the 10, and the reason you're requesting the 10 has to do with the occupancy, the average occupancy load, or however. Have you considered perhaps instead, because I don't believe you'd have to come before this body for approval, have you considered instead doing the 6 and then setting up your fee structure such that, it keeps you in business as opposed to pursuing 7 or more?
We absolutely have done that. And unfortunately, the fee structure, the contracts that we're looking at, we can tell the county, we can tell VA what we need, but getting that money is another story.
Sure. Okay. I appreciate you answering all of my questions, and I have no further questions this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Do any other of the members have any further questions for the applicant?
Good evening.
Good evening.
I did have, are you allowed to give priority to locals, or is that not allowed or considered at all?
Well, we're kind of, that's why we're here, is to help the locals. We're not necessarily going to seek outside contracts to bump locals. But it's kind of like if there's no bed available, then they would be put next on the slot. I don't know, it kind of depends on their need and that kind of things that would be taken into consideration at the time. But yeah, I would prefer to be treating the local residents as opposed to bringing outside people.
Do you know, would any of the residents or clients, would they be sent to your place as a condition of a court action?
It would depend on our ability to gain a contract with El Dorado County, or like AB 109 or CPS. And if we do get, if we qualify for those contracts, then it's possible that somebody could be court ordered to our facility, yes. I can tell you that now and in the future, I have no intent on going over the state contracts for SASCA clients that right out of prison. You know, local people.
Do you know if we here in the city have a threshold of 6 or fewer beds, and then 6 and higher? Does
In the city, I believe that there's Narconon that is over off of Broadway, down past McDonald's, and it is I think a spiritual-based treatment program that may be 6 beds. The only other treatment facility that is near us is Progress House Outpatient over on Coloma Street and B Street. To my knowledge, there are no other licensed program, and I have looked that up recently. As a part of state license and certification, I have to identify referral sources should we be full or a client doesn't qualify, and I could not find online or listed by the state of California any other licensed treatment programs. If you have 6 people, you still have to be licensed. If you're not licensed, then you're violating state law and they can come and arrest you. So you can't give treatment unless you have a license, whether it's 6 or more.
So with this program, do you need a state license to have just a 1-bed facility?
Yes.
Okay. Does the state law allow or prohibit your combined, if you're certified now for transitional housing and you're going for supportive, will they allow you to have mixed use?
No. The transitional will have to end at the time we start to receive clients.
Thank you.
Mr. Olson, thank you for being with us.
Yes, sir.
One quick question. Have you been involved in this type of treatment facility in another area or town?
In El Dorado County, yes. I've been
In El Dorado County?
Yes, I've been working in the field for 17 years. I've worked a men's program for 7 years and then women's programs in the county for 4 or 5 years as a program manager. I worked at an outpatient program for about 8 years as a line counselor, lead counselor, program manager. Does that answer your question?
Well, what I was looking for is if you have directed a facility, a live-in facility like your
Progress House Men's Residential in Coloma, I ran that for approximately 6 years. I was the program manager.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for appearing before us. I'd like to ask now that we get some public input. Given the number of people in attendance, the clear level of interest, I may find it necessary to invoke some time limits. The intent of those time limits are to give more people the opportunity to participate and speak. So thank you for coming forward.
Thank you.
Would you state your name for the record?
My name is Allison Lopich, and this is my husband, Tom, and we run the Glen Morey Bed and Breakfast, which is up High Street. Oh, and my mother, Maggie, who also lives in a granny flat on the property, with us there. I have kind of divided up what I wanted to say. I'm not going to talk about the safety, how we feel it maybe isn't a safety, because I realized I might only have 3 minutes to talk. So I kind of want to address a couple of things. I wanted to address how
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry.
We're not going to cut you off at 3 minutes, and
Okay.
I need to ask you to speak just a little bit slower for me.
Sure.
I'm
I was
slow
worried
on
that
the
I only had
uptake,
3
and I'm
minutes,
really
yes.
sorry. Sorry,
Okay.
Mr.
I
Take a
have- I
breath. Take
practiced
a
to
breath.
get-
We want to
yeah.
hear what everyone has to say.
Okay.
So okay.
I'm like, I got 3 minutes and I got to get this
No,
in
no,
there.
no, no,
Okay.
no, no.
So, all right. So the two things I was going to talk about, there's other people going to talk about other things, but I was going to talk about how this affects my business, and we'll have a direct effect on my business. And also I wanted to talk about the legality in the paper that I gave you earlier. And I wanted to question how it is really, is it even really legal or fair to have as many facilities in our neighborhood as we currently do now? I can address either one first if you had a preference, but. Okay, so most of my guests find me in one of two different ways, and the primarily is via the internet, and which is great. I'm very fortunate because I can put up a really nice website, and I can show nice pictures of my 153-year-old third oldest house in Placerville on 1.6 acres behind Ridgeway Manor and behind this facility up there, and sing my praises if you would, but. My customers don't always, take at face value what they see on a website. They often will go and look for reviews, online reviews of prior guests and the things that they say about their stay. And I have significant concern that it would affect my business if customers were to leave reviews that said something to the effect of nice place, but it's got a drug rehab on the corner. There's a lot of, people hanging around. I didn't feel safe. Things like that would really affect my business. The other way that I get business is through referrals. Sometimes I get referrals from the Shafsky House when they're full. Someone might knock on their door, and then they send them up to me. And the other way that's becoming more and more prevalent today is smartphone usage. So someone might come for the day to Placerville and be on Main Street. They're having a good time, and they decide to stay. They don't have lodging, and they decide, pull out the smartphone and look up lodging. Well, I come up at that point as the closest lodging other than Carey House to them, and they might decide to drive up and take a look. Now, the current situation when they choose to do that is when they come up to High Street, they see the Ridgeview Manor there, and it's a 35-room, what is it called, single-room occupancy, SRO, where it's got two sometimes people in the building, each room, very low income. And there's a lot of trash, often along the side of the building, 5 boarded up windows, occasionally stacks of stained mattresses, piles of tires. The road, High Street, I'm told by people who've lived there since childhood, hasn't been paved in 40 years properly, and it's potholed and narrow. And in addition to that, we're going to add a drug rehabilitation center right on the other side of the only way in and out of my facility, my business, my home, where my children live also. So that is a significant concern for me. I also want to talk about the fairness of concentrating single residential neighborhoods with a disproportionate number of group home facilities. And I'm aware that the state of California made this legal by right to open a 6-bed group home facility in any neighborhood. I'm aware of this without getting a permit. And I have also read thank you very much for encouraging me into this week, spending quite a bit of time reading our general plan housing document, all 180-something pages of it. And both versions, actually, I read, because the first one I came across by accident was the one you see at the top of the handout that I gave you here, which, when I got to the point about community care facilities, it seemed pretty clear that what this is right now and what Treehouse is, and also what the environmental alternatives, it's a youth transitional for kids that have aged out of foster care situations. It's the 3 little dots close together. That is directly bordering my property on the other side. And also there's another neighbor, Maureen, between me, and then there's another Progress House on the other side of her. I traced the environmental alternatives home was a tremendous ordeal for us over the last 6 months. I got to know my neighbors over this fiasco. We became the drug hub of Placerville because of the way that was mismanaged. And when I could elaborate anyhow you want. I could go on and on. But essentially, we have had neighbors. We had a 90-year-old neighbor who had the side of her house ripped off, 3 feet of it, because some drunk, high teenagers got into a brawl, and one of them jumped into their cars, slammed into 2 other cars, slammed into the side of her house while she was in it, took off the house, and left. I have had people in my trees while I'm going around trying to blow and take care of my property. I have high people in my trees, and I'm saying, why are you there? They say they're looking for their wife. They won't come down. I have to call the police. I have had people trek through my property carrying dirty stained mattresses who were homeless and were given permission to flop in these units by the residents, so it was legal and the police could do nothing about it. It has been a nightmare beyond. But anyway, to point this out, I don't know how that facility was allowed, because it is less than 1,000 feet from this facility we're talking about putting in here. I walked it, I measured it, it's something around 600 feet if you go from the side of one building to the side of the other. That's not even counting that tree house is right in the middle of that. I don't understand what the new wording is about. I read it, and I'm not sure. I see that it was just changed a few months ago. And that indicates to me that as of February of this year, this situation we were living in that we were tormented with was actually illegal because we had more than one facility within 1,000 feet. We had a number of them. Or I don't know if it's illegal or whatever, but not to, according to this, it doesn't stand up to this rule. This 1,000-foot rule is a fantastic rule. It is a rule that protects homeowners from being boxed in on all sides by nothing but facilities. It allows neighborhoods to have a facility where they need one, from place to place to place, and it spreads them out so that no one area gets a disproportionate. And I would really love to hear why, if that was changed, why it was changed, why that was thought to not be a good idea, because it's a great one. And also, am I even reading it correctly? Because in one sense, if you read it, it almost could indicate that the 1,000 feet distancing with 6 or fewer people is not constraining to the development of, so it's we don't need to get rid of the 1,000-foot rule because it's not holding back our development. That's another way of reading it. It was unclear to me, even to now, whether that's been gotten rid of or not. Lastly, I would like to say that as a condition of my CUP, I am required by the City of Placerville and my CUP to reside on my premises. And I also think this is a very, very good rule. And the reason it's a good rule is because it ensures that when I come into a neighborhood and I want to run my business there, I am making a business that I am willing to live in and among. I am bringing something to my neighborhood that is not detrimental. It's not going to be something that I don't want to be involved in. I'm there all the time. It is a good, good rule. And I question whether this type of facility that Mr. Page wants to bring is one that he would want to live in 24 hours a day, like I do. I think that there's a reason why these facilities require a CUP and that you can't just have them. And I think that bending the rule on this and allowing it would be detrimental to our community and our neighborhood. Thank you. I can answer any questions, and I'd love to hear any comments that you can fill me in on the 1,000-foot rule, because I still don't really know what happened there.
Thank you. Do any commission members have any questions?
My recommendation is that we proceed through the public hearing, given the number of folks in the audience, and if we have specific questions, we can follow up.
I concur.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Tom Loprich. My wife and I run the Glen Morey House Bed and Breakfast. 13 years ago, a proposed drug rehab in this building made the buyers of our current home back out of buying the property that we now live in. It's a little ironic. Also, there was also approximately 11 registered child sexual offenders were in residence in Ridgeview Manor as well. While this was going on, no one on Coloma Street could sell their home. If you put a drug and alcohol facility in this location, no one is going to want to buy or live in one of these historic homes. The homeowners who are unable to sell, they'll either move away, they'll rent the homes. And I can be the first to tell you that historic homes need a lot of work, they need a lot of care, they deteriorate quickly. What you'll be doing is encouraging the old homes to be rented to tenants who are not interested or able to put the time, effort, and money into the homes that they require. What you will instead be doing is hasten the deterioration of the historic district, which is not in harmony with the general plan. Placerville was once referred to in an article I read as the Carmel of the foothills, and we would like to uphold that image. Also, as a father of 4 young children, I am concerned with the safety and the freedom of movement, which should be their right. My 11-year-old daughter and my 13-year-old son have friends who own a business over on Main Street. Their daughters ride bikes up from town to visit on our property. They'd like to be able to walk across to the overpass, maybe to the candy store, to the city pool. In a year, my 13-year-old will need to walk between these facilities every day to go to high school and back. These are normal things that many of the adult residents in our neighborhood enjoyed at their age. Their right to do this in safety is as important as Mr. Page's right to open up a group home. According to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration, only 44% of persons completed treatment in these facilities, and there's no way to tell if the treatment was successful long term. 24% of patients had treatment stopped for them, possibly due to some incident which we would prefer to not happen in our neighborhood. The other 24% discontinued their own treatment. This facility will be staffed 24 hours by, from what I'm gathering here, volunteers mainly. And it is not a lockdown facility. What happens, and this has already been touched on, when the desire to use is so great, a patient decides to leave in the middle of the night. They will be in our neighborhood. They could possibly be on Main Street. Will they be looking for something to steal in exchange for drugs? This week, my wife and I learned a mental health patient had escaped from the facility on Spring Street at 3 a.m. The following night, we were awakened by another man yelling, "Help, call 911," at 2:45 a.m. He was drunk and had gotten in a fight, according to police. We don't want any more middle-of-the-night events. We wish that instead of bringing more problems to our area, the police help us instead to deal with the problems of Ridgeview Manor and the walking overpass. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Will the next person approach the podium and state your name and...
My name is Maggie Smith. I live in the historic district. I was not born here. I am a loyal American citizen, and I voted today, as I do every time. It's a privilege. But though I was not born here, I have invested my life savings into ownership of the historic Henry Morey House, which was built in the 1850s, because I thought it was a wonderful place for my grandchildren to grow up. However, we have been gradually surrounded by problems created by absentee landlords who do not care about maintaining the standards of our neighborhood. There have been 3 major assaults that I'd like to tell you about. In 2006, we discovered that there were 13 registered sex offenders living at the Ridgeway Manor. And we had to deal with that problem, and the committee helped us solve it. In 2011, there was a proposal for a transitional facilities for foster youth in 3 small buildings on the edge of our property. I questioned, common sense questioned, the wisdom of taking foster youth and putting them into an unsupervised little unit by themselves. That's not a transition. And so I called Joe Wiley, who's the manager, and he lives down in Jackson. And he said, oh, don't worry, Maggie, these are going to be the cream of the crop, college kids. And I thought, well, you know, maybe I should think about them. They have had a bad start in life, and maybe I could be a grandmother to them, or maybe I could tutor them in their studies. Boy, was I wrong. The last thing they wanted was a grandmother or any help because there were no studies. What we got instead was one young man who was already a felon for dealing with drugs. And instead of getting the promise, what the reality was, we had drug users, we had a car thief, we had brawlers, and it resulted in a huge cost to our peace officers because they were almost daily driving by my house to go solve problems because, as my daughter said, it became the unofficial drug center. All the underground, they all know each other. They don't need to go on the internet. The word passes around, and they all came over there. They noticed that you could cut a shortcut through our property because the Henry Morey property is 1.6 acres on the top of that hill. And so they would cut across there either to buy the drugs to use them or to flee from the police if the police came around this way. Now in 2014, I'm looking at the prospect of bringing 10 men who have serious drug addiction and anger problems. And we're going to put them in bunks in a small building with nothing to look out on but a blacktop parking lot. Now that's wrong. It's inhumane. You're bringing men who are controlled by a terrible addiction into close proximity of my home, and I do not feel safe. I do not have confidence in the promises made of the non-resident supervisors and landlords because I have heard these things before. Even as I stand here, this project is morphing and things are changing. The guarantee of supervision is not what it was originally. We now have volunteers. That's what my neighbor was told. And the reason I stress the social services department is who the transitional people blamed. They said, it's not us that's the problem, it's the social services didn't evaluate the people properly when they sent them to us. And the social services are going to be sending people to this unit for a temporary period, and we're going to get a fresh batch every 2 or 3 months.
Ma'am, I appreciate your heartfelt and compelling testimony. If you could summarize.
I will, okay. I won't tell you about the other bad stuff. I'll simply go to my last statement. Commissioners, please consider, this is one evening for you, but this decision affects me for the rest of my life. May I take a minute to read from a neighbor who gave me the letter to read to you? Or would you prefer that I go to the end of the line? I can also do that.
No, you go right ahead and read the letter, ma'am.
As the owners of 811 High Street, we do not want a change at 2986 Coloma Street. The lady says she's lived there all of her life. It's her family home. She says, I spoke with Mr. Page for about an hour and voiced our concerns to him. She asked him about the supervision. She said, will there be felons coming there? And he said, well, there could be. What about child molesters? Well, he's not going to check for that.
Excuse me, are you reading from the letter or?
Well, that was what she
Extemporizing.
told me. Okay, the last statement. His attitude was, and she has it in quotes, I can buy the house next to you and put in a 6-bed facility whether you like it or not. Now, is that the statement of a good neighbour? Thank you very much, and I do appreciate your thoroughness. I hope you will keep digging in this till you get all the answers that you need before you make your decision.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Craig Harrisek, 2937 Conrad Street, Placerville. Mr. Page? Yes. Is that Ellen?
Yes, I am.
Pleased to meet you. I live just up the street from you. Got a couple of questions. Are you guys going to live there? Excuse me?
You need to address the chairperson of the planning commission, me. So you
Okay.
talk to me.
Got it.
Thanks.
Sorry about that. I'd like to know if Mr. and Mrs. Page are going to live at the residence down the street.
Okay, well, I think before we ironed out this little communications hiccup, I understand them to say that they do not plan to live at this location.
And I heard from Mr. Page earlier assurances that the residents in his property were going to be behaved. Is that not correct?
They certainly represented such.
Okay, and so my next question's rhetorical. As a neighbor, I'd like to know how someone that isn't going to live in their property is going to be able to promise me that they're going to be in control of what does go on their property. Rhetorical. I also heard him express his concerns for the neighbors and the neighborhood. So I'd just like to say in closing, in under 3 minutes, that our neighborhood is riddled with people that own property, don't live there, and don't take care of what goes on with their property. I would really like to welcome new neighbors, but I need those neighbors to live there, not be absentee and not in control of what goes on their property. Did I make it in 3 minutes?
With 45 seconds to spare,
Thank
sir.
you.
Hi, I'm Pat Nash, and I have lived on Conrad Street for the past 29 years. Tim's facility would be kitty corner to me. And in the time I've known Tim and Ellen, when they've had the transitional there, they have been good neighbors. Last summer, we had a lot of crime coming up from downtown on the pedestrian overcrossings. I was taking pictures of drug dealers down on the street, and Tim helped us to run them out of there. And so I appreciate that. I also appreciate them wanting to start a rehab. 10 years ago, my husband was afflicted with a disease, and the VA gave him a shot at 30 days in a similar treatment facility, and he's got 10 years sober today. It doesn't make them bad people. It's a disease. So I wish everybody could see it that way, but I understand they can't. But I give my support to both the Pages on this. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Steve Tolentino. I've only lived here off and on. Well, I come up here from Los Angeles every month, or at least I try. And we bought a house here in Placerville, right next to the bed and breakfast of Maggie And I also invested in some more property up here, rentals. Needless to say, one of them was in disarray. And almost like the Ridgeway house, I brought that back to life. Got some new people. Now it's a safer place. They love to live there. Me and my wife decided to buy a house up here in Placerville based upon the website that says it's a lovely place to live. That's my perception of it. Until 2 days ago, when Maggie told me about all these things that I did not know of. That's the fear that you're going to have to deal with when the perception turns around about Placerville, if you allow these things to continue. I don't know what kind of effects it's going to have on property value, but now I think I know why it took so long, 2.5 years, for the former owner to sell the house that I bought. And that's probably why. The house that I bought was not cheap. And if it loses value based upon these things that are happening here that you may be allowing, the internet's a very powerful thing, like what's going to happen possibly with Maggie's business. And everybody else who may be having that same kind of business, or what's going to affect their lives. I really don't know what the scope is going to be if this facility here goes farther than they're proposing. Next thing you know, you have another one that he's going to propose to you. Probably in your neighborhood. Sure, he's a businessman, but he doesn't live here. He probably doesn't even care. Listen to what he said about how his facility is going to operate. One person supervising 6 to 10. You just imagine these guys, you don't know who they are. They probably don't even know the scope of who these people they're going to consider as clients, residents. All they have to do is just go off the deep end, and then that one person's not going to be able to handle all of them. And you know how mob mentality can be. These are drug users. These are alcoholics. They may not have been as nice of a person as he, because everybody's different. Sure, I did my share too, and I was probably not the kind of person you would ever want to deal with. And you're going to get a lot of those. You just don't know who. You don't know when it's going to happen. And then
Begging your pardon, sir, we're at 4 minutes now. Would you mind summarizing? Thank you.
Then we got volunteers, again, who are going to be watching these people. You're going to see something that's probably not going to be very pretty here. At least that's what I'm thinking. In closing, I'm worried about my property. I'm worried about my safety. I came here to retire, but not under these conditions. I'm coming from Los Angeles, and it feels like I'm going right back in here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lexi Hall. I live at up on Cottage Street, and I'm only going to touch on a couple things. I went through this whole thing and highlighted. I could be here for a long time, but I'm sure other people are going to cover some of this other stuff. My main thing, they said this would be an asset to Placerville, that we really need this, but he's saying it's not even going to be El Dorado County residents. So are we going to bus in people from Sac County, Amador County? Why would that be an asset to Placerville? I don't understand that. If it's not helping the people that live here that have problems, it's not an asset to our town. It's detrimental. We're shipping in people with problems. That's not what we need. We have enough of our own with problems. And the other thing about the 10-bed, Okay, that's 2 beds to each bedroom. Okay, it's about money. That's what this whole thing boils down to, is money. They have to have 10 beds. Now, what's going to stop them in 2 years from saying, well, our costs went up. We need to change our use permit. We need 14 people in there now. We're going to put 3 beds in each room. And then a couple years down the road, well, we're going to put 4 beds in each room. It's crap. It's all about money. It's not about helping people in this county. Otherwise, they wouldn't be bringing them in from other counties. That's my primary thing. But I'm sure everybody else will cover other things. That's it.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am flattered, but I'm going to ask you to hold your applause until after we adjourn the meeting.
Tyler DeCourt, resident, Bedford, 2866. Sorry, I'm on the spot here. I want to start out by saying that I am a drug addict. I am an alcoholic. I currently I'll have 4 years sober on September the 15th. And that is thanks to a treatment facility much like this one. I think maybe the residents are getting confused with seeing the problem instead of seeing a solution. The people that they have had issues with are strung out. The people they're having issues with are committing crimes. I'm in recovery. I don't do those things. This is a facility geared towards education and rehabilitation. I don't know much about Ridgeview Manor or the other facilities around. The credentials of their management team, I don't know. But this is to aid in fixing the problem that all these people have with the area. I drive that road home every night. And to say it's historical is a fancy word for rundown. I agree with that. The road's cracked, narrow. No, it's not your problem. But we can look at it and say what's wrong with it. Or we
Please
can look
direct
at
your
it
comments
and
to me,
say-
sir.
And say, what can we do to better it? And Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world today. I'm willing to take this risk with my house to help somebody else out because of the joy it's given me in my life today. My father's also drug addict, alcoholic, and he's in Kaiser, intensive care unit, bleeding internally because his organs are failing on him because he didn't want to be part of a solution. Those people are not going to be at the facility. Those people are going to be getting high. This is for people who want to be sober. And preventing somebody from having that ability is not in my nature. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment, sir.
My name's Manny Martinez. I'm also in recovery as well. I've been sober for 3.5 years. I was somewhat mandated to go. I did poorly in life, but you know what? Because of a facility like this, allowed me the opportunity to grow as a person. Now I go to school. I'm on an honor roll. I have a job. I help and volunteer with other alcoholics. I have volunteered at the Progress House, which is a 20-person facility, and I was the only one on. And I helped those people out, and they never left when I was there. This house allows an opportunity for a better life, and I got to be grateful for that. Tim and Ellen and Paige are just allowing that opportunity for the local community. I just want to, because there's a lot of bad things said. I want to say the positive things that have happened. So, thank you.
And thank you for that.
And my name's Jeff Little, and I'm on Coloma Street. I think one thing for sure, I mean, we all have sympathy with drug rehabilitation, and we know it is a very necessary thing for the community. Things you need to look at, though, is it really needs to be in the right setting, the right location, and having the right people managing it. And so far, there's a lot of concerns that those aren't being met. A lot of us, it's a big difference between if you go to jail and one of these programs with an open door policy. At the jail, you're not leaving. With situations like this with facilities, if these guys are getting out of hand or something, they're not restraining them, and they can't lock them down and keep them there. So you could easily have, I mean, a guy doing great one day, next day he's having major problems. They're not going to be able to keep him in the facility. He could be zipping up the street, possibly at the same time all the kids get out of school. I mean, sure, it hasn't happened, but who knows what could happen. And so that's why we're here to try and veer this off. I don't know if any of you have seen anybody come off alcohol or heroin. Heroin's really popular right now in this town. You could YouTube it. You can go to the jail and see it as well, because my wife's a nurse there, and it's coming in all the time. If you have one volunteer there, I don't know at what stage people are being brought in, but one volunteer is not going to risk their life to keep somebody in that facility. They're going to zip out the door if they want to. And that's then going to put more police having to come down that way as well. Other things we just don't really need. In the last couple months, from some of the other things happening in the neighborhood, we had our car battery stolen out of our car. We also, one car broke down. Then one day it left, and sure enough, we went over to our trucks and the window's open, and our battery was gone. And so there's constant problems in the neighborhood, and even on Easter, we had the family over, and the doorbell rang. And we weren't expecting anybody else, so I ran up and got it, and here's a guy completely on drugs on our front doorstep. And so he saw our welcome sign at the base of our stairway, took that to mean, I'm going to come talk to him, and I couldn't get him off the doorstep. And he's completely on drugs. You don't want to shut the door on him because you don't know what's going to set him off or make him mad at that point. So, I mean, there's already issues in the neighborhood to where, as citizens in our neighborhood, we really don't want to add to it. So, part of the Planning Commission, we really hope you guys are looking at the best interests of the neighborhood and hopefully making the neighborhood safer in the long run. And we hope you can continue looking at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Hello, my name is Maureen DeLapp, and I'm here to speak about my father who lived in the neighborhood. I moved him up from the Bay Area in November of 2012. He was 77 years old, and I brought him up after I brought my mother up, who passed away in the Bay Area. We buried her at St. Patrick's Cemetery in this neighborhood, moved my father off of Bedford, and he lived there for 1 year, and he loved the area. He wanted to live in historic downtown Placerville. He lived on a piece of property that reminded him of Ireland, and all he talked about was historic Placerville. And the reason I moved up here 12 years ago to Placerville, and we just love the neighborhood. And in the 1 year that he was here before he passed away, he saw changes in the neighborhood. We didn't notice this because I'm not in historic Placerville, but in that 1 year, we noticed the changes in the neighborhood. I would visit him every day after work to make sure that he was okay. And when I came down the back roads from where I live to see him, I would come down Spring Street in Coloma, and I could see the changes, and I would pass this manor, and you could see the changes. And I wasn't familiar with that area at that time. And even going to see Mom at the cemetery, you could see what would look like drug, unsafe people. And when Dad passed away, we had, just like Mr. Little said, we had an incident. We had somebody come to our estate sale, and they said that they asked if I had a son, because somebody was in my driveway my father's driveway. It's a steep downhill driveway, goes off to the side, and somebody was down there sifting through a box that was next to our garbage can that you cannot see from the street. But they didn't know if I had a son, but they didn't think they're mentioning it to me because it looked like a vagrant person, was the word she said, vagrant person, in this beautiful neighborhood that I thought was safe. But I knew things were changing, and I thought, my goodness, if, you know, thank goodness my father isn't around for this, but I didn't realize that it was coming closer and closer, and now it's hitting home. This is a neighborhood that, since my father's passed away, I was going to move into. I was thinking of moving into. But now with all this stuff that's going on, as everyone else has mentioned, it's changing. It could be changing the property values. It's changing my mind on should I move into or should I not move into, and what is that going to do for everyone else that's going to possibly move into the neighborhood. And as we discussed earlier tonight, 7.1, section 7.1, about windows, how the windows are going to affect the historic district. What is this going to do to the historic district of Placerville?
Once again, I'll ask you to hold your applause.
Thank
I'll
you.
come out front and everybody can applaud.
Thank you.
Meantime, let's concentrate on the testimony. Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Maureen Boakland. I'm a resident of Spring Street. I've lived there for about 2 years now. I'm originally from San Mateo County. Came up here 3 years ago. I fell in love with Placerville. I love my area I'm in. My house is 160 years old, second oldest house in all of Placerville. I know very well about alcoholism and drug addicts. My father was an alcoholic my whole life growing up. He was in an inpatient hospital setting, and he became sober. Last 15 years of his life was wonderful. I know how good these programs are in a hospital setting, not in a residential setting. These men are going to come out of their home in this resident setting, look across the street to where all the drug guys are. And how's that going to work? That's going to be wanting them to go do drugs, do other things. They're going to come in through our neighborhood. I am between Allison and Spring Street, where the youth transitional housing is practically in my front yard. I have been through hell for 6 months. I have found drug pipes in my yard. My puppy picked it up from my yard and brought it to me, a glass pipe. I posted it on the El Dorado County Watch and showed everybody, look at I have found in my neighborhood. I was appalled. I couldn't believe it. Realized it's coming from these teenagers in this house. Beer bottles in my yard. I know Allison has gone over much of what happened, has been going on with us for 6 months there. To put this residential facility in our neighborhood where our children are, where people are walking around, it will be so unsafe. It's not a good idea. It's not going to work. They're going to set these men up to come in this house. They're going to fail because they just have to look across the street to a drug house to get their drugs or alcohol, or walk across the street to the bars on Main Street. I respectfully hope that you deny this request, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
My name is Laura Clark. My husband and I are trying to make the decision on whether or not we will stay in Placerville at all. It's been a long-going conversation that we've had, and this is helping me make up my mind. If kicking addiction were easy, we wouldn't have the struggle that leaves only 44% of addicts able to complete just 30 days. These people you hear speaking live here. They raise their families here. 44% every 30 days. What is the plan for the other 66%? I'm really concerned about the 66%. Not having the ability to have a car means they simply walk away. Where do they walk to? Downtown? So then we have more addicts loitering downtown. Will they join our homeless and become part of that group? Just imagine for a moment that these residents will go through 66% failure 12 times a year. 120 addicts, some with criminal records, every year. If they have a waiting list, might that number be much higher, as one fails at 20 days and another takes that spot, and 20 days later another and another? How about sex offenders? Are we going to be looking and seeing if there are sex offenders within this group? How about residential burglars? Many addicts in the grip of addiction choose to become burglars to support their habit. How exactly are any of the residents of this neighborhood supposed to sleep at night, and how will they leave their homes and work during the day? I can't figure out why we are even here having this meeting. When I read all the information, including the application, I was flabbergasted. My background is law enforcement. I have met this particular segment of the population far more times than I ever wished. Many times their biggest wish was to kick this habit, and they would tell me so. Over and over, arrest after arrest after arrest. Typically, burglary and theft. The crimes of addicts, property crimes, are the biggest and fastest growing faction of crimes being committed in El Dorado County today. I'm absolutely educated about addiction as part of my training. Here are the things that I know to be true. Addiction is all about temptation and learning to resist. I know that Ridgeview Manor has more than the average number of calls for police and medical services due to drugs. I know that that overpass area has been an area of concern with any variation of drugs sold and consumed in the near proximity. Why would you ever bring this to these people, to this neighborhood? I know that in the grip of addiction, dropping these folks into this neighborhood, already dealing with a higher than normal drug use, would be like dropping them into enemy territory. Each and every time they step outside the door, there is Ridgeview Manor. Wouldn't this amount to walking the gauntlet whenever they walked anywhere? How is this helpful to the underlying cause? How does this ever support the business plan? There is no track record to see how this works. The odds are stacked firmly against success by location alone. I read in the application that there will be 24/7 monitoring. I'm curious about that because the only true 24/7 hour monitoring is in a locked facility, and I know that this is not a locked facility. So does that mean they will be accompanied wherever they go 24 hours a day? Or just that the building will be monitored? So if I have this right, we will have those in the throes of addiction walking a gauntlet unsupervised. Will there be a curfew? When will this walking or loitering out in the front area take place? Except for a law enforcement person, these people cannot be held. You may not hold them. You can threaten them. You can tell them that they will have to leave the program. But leaving the program is as simple as your own 2 feet and how quickly someone from our police department can get there to do what? They are free to leave. They are free to leave. While I applaud their intentions, the simple facts are that Mr. and Mrs. Page already own this building, but that doesn't make this the right place for this application. Having the best of intentions will not change the national failure rate of 66%. It will not keep these people before you from being victims of crimes that haven't actually happened yet. I know that Mr. Page means well, but will not choose to live there, and that speaks volumes. These residents won't have that same choice. I know that this is the wrong location for this application. In fact, it is one of the worst possible places you could have it. I urge you to vote with the concerned residents and help them save their neighborhood. I don't believe that $3,500 a month for 30 days is serving El Dorado County. If that is private pay, that is not going to be the people from here, if you know anything about the addicts of Placerville. Usually, the addicts of Placerville have hit rock bottom, and they are mandated there. If you're mandated there, it's not your choice. And addiction is all about the choice to change. You can't make someone change. Due diligence and a fiduciary responsibility, that's real estate. So that means full disclosure on any of these people that are going to try to leave if you approve this. If they try to sell their home, that's going to be part of the package. They're going to have to tell that to every single prospective buyer. And my husband and I did look at the 2 houses that came for sale that are next to the Episcopalian church right there. No, thank you. You can make all the rules and conditions you want on a conditional use permit, but only the lawful will actually comply to them.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Well, I am Rita Timewell, and I am the owner of the Albert Shafsky House Bed and Breakfast on the corner of Spring and Coloma. And I know many of the things that I'm going to talk about have already been addressed, but I want to reiterate the importance of how we feel. Our concerns are that at this time there are numerous facilities housing people using social services in our neighborhood. There's Ridgeway Manor. We know that there are 3 sex offenders living within a mile radius, the psychiatric ward on Spring Street, transition house for mentally ill members of the community on Spring Street, and the Progress House on Highway 49, also known as Coloma Road. Ridgeview Manor is the most rundown property on the street. There have been numerous calls to the police, broken down cars in the adjacent parking lot, as well as people loitering outside and across the street. The current business owner resides out of county, and should a 10-bed residential facility be located next to this? The psych ward is a 24/7 licensed, locked, professionally staffed facility. The T house, transition house, is not staffed or locked. However, the tenants are monitored and there are a maximum of 6 at any given time. The point being, there are already several facilities in less than a mile radius of the proposed 10-bed residential treatment facility. Again, is that the place you want to place a drug and alcohol rehab facility? Have there been background checks done on the staff and the folks who will be taking care of the clients there? And I'm wondering how many calls to the police department have been made since the current clients have been living there. Our guests, children from the high school, and locals use the overcrossing to get to town or even to their homes. It can be uncomfortable for our guests to walk past these facilities, which causes them to have to drive to town, or even worse, visit a different town to spend their money. We've had many of our guests ask about the manor. And we pay approximately $6,000 a year in transient occupancy tax to actually support the city and the services provided to fellow residents. In addition, our guests spend thousands of dollars on Main Street, in restaurants, at wineries, and rafting each year. What's the advantage to the city for the facility? Are taxes other than property taxes being paid to the city or county? So it says there is 24-hour supervision. Does that mean someone will be on site the entire time? Are they paid professionals or volunteers? Is there a curfew? And as a bed and breakfast owner, we are mandated to live on the property and be available 24/7 to our guests, which we have done without incident for the past 12 years. We are also required to have a safe serve license to serve food, and I'm curious as to how that will work for them. To this end, we ask, have there been other properties in El Dorado County looked at for this facility? And we understand that housing is important. However, it isn't our historical neighborhood already stepping up to those who need assistance. And it's not our choice to be called the historical neighborhood. That's where we live. And we have nothing to do with streets.
Thank you, ma'am. Would anyone else care to?
Yeah, I'd like a couple of comments if I could. My name is Barry Chandler, and I live on Spring Street. And we've covered a lot of territory here today, and I think people have made some really good points. But I think there's a couple things that you might want to keep in mind, because I'm assuming you live in Placerville too. It's a historic district. It's nice. Sure, there's some problems in the area. There's drugs. The manor house is an embarrassment. But that's not the character of the neighborhood at all. It's a nice neighborhood with lots of kids. I've listened to his business plan. Recently retired after 30 years of being in business. I didn't hear anything where they talked about their professional background, their education, which makes them qualified to do this sort of thing. All they talked about was the fact is, you know, I used to be an addict and now I'm not. Well, I'm sorry, that's not very reassuring. So this is a disease, and allowing them to come into our neighborhood with 10 people, 10 additional people, with no plan for evening supervision whatsoever, you're putting a disease in our neighborhood. And I would ask, how would you feel if it was in your next door neighborhood? Totally inappropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Chandler.
Good evening. My name is Bob Camina. I'm a service provider in El Dorado County for drug and alcohol clients. I have been a service provider in El Dorado County certified service provider for over 20 years. For 25 years, I've been involved with the movement. Yeah, I'm a dope fiend and alcoholic too. What I can attest to is there's a couple factors here, and I hear the points are valid. They definitely are valid. However, Placerville is gutted by an interstate highway, and that lends to people jumping off the freeway wherever they're at. Additionally, I agree that the Ridgeview Manor it's a sad situation. It is a sad situation. What I've known the recovery community to do in the past, and there are residential recovery houses, in multiple suburbs that folks, for the most part, unless there's a sign out in front, they don't even really know that that's what's going on. Mr. Olson, the program director, called me at my office once about almost 20 years ago, and he said, "Can a guy make a living at this thing?" And I laughed and said, "Well, if they hang around long enough, you can." And he's done so. I've watched his program. I've watched the program that he previously worked at very successfully. If there is such a thing as 24-hour supervision, that doesn't necessarily mean that I've not seen a riot in a recovery house yet where they did mutiny on the bounty. That's not happened in any experiences that I know of. Doesn't mean it hasn't happened, but I don't see it. And to automatically shift the blame onto a possible situation without and it being contributing to the bad situation and not possibly a part of the solution, I think is not insightful. Because I have also seen that these residential units hold their own in communities, which include they're not guardian angels by any means. However, they are more eyes and they are more ears, and you don't see active alcoholics and dope fiends flocking to the recovery house. They're going the other direction. And so there are some, I think there are some possible advantages to establishment of a conditional use permit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, my name is Clem Bowl, and I live on 2934 Coloma Street, right on the corner of Spring and Coloma. And I am also worried about the price of my house going down on kind of maybe a situation which could be happening here. And I've been a resident of this county all my life, and I'm proud of what I've done with my house. My brother and I restored it 40 years ago, and I went to high school here, and my main purpose is protection of the quality of my house. And I can see maybe there could be a problem, and so I wish you could take that in consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Dee Little, and I live on Coloma Street, 2960. I live by myself. I came up here to retire because I thought it was a nice town. Well, we ended up with the foster care people. And I ended up one morning getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning to someone in my backyard. I now have locks on my gates, which I never expected. I came from Silicon Valley. I never had that. I never had police officers in my backyard before, which became a habit there with us foster people, who we were guaranteed were good kids. And now you're going to stick another home there? We are inundated with the wrong kind of people. We need good people in this neighborhood, not the wrong kind. We need positive people. Our children are there. There's a lot of us seniors there, and it's not right that we have to be afraid to live in our own homes. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Well, unless somebody stands up right quick, I'm going to...
I was just wondering, is it possible to have the police department just give their view on that neighborhood and what they think and the problems they've had in there?
Mr. Chairman, as a matter of fact, I was going to actually ask that once we've concluded the public hearing. This is one of the things I think was really missing from the staff report.
Well, Mr. Little, there's your answer. So I would like to ask our chief of police what his impressions are of the neighborhood are Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
Point of order. The public hearing is open or closed, and before you answer that, Mr. Page did have his hand up, and out of deference,
Sorry.
hold on, okay. and
Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and I look forward to seeing you back at the podium then.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there is.
Okay, why don't we all come back together in fellowship? Yes, you do.
Hi, my name is Kimberly Waltz, and I'm a resident at 877 Cottage Street. And I currently have a 15-year-old son who attends El Dorado High School. So the scare of my child having to walk down Coloma Road and up Conrad, where he has been stopped several times by some of the residents that live at Ridgeview Manor, what have you, and no, you cannot go that way, or no, you have to pay me, you know, whatever money you have on you or whatever food you have on you to get up to Conrad. They're stopping my daughter-in-law as she's driving home from Marshall Hospital after taking care of people all night long. They're stopping her from getting up Conrad. There's kids that go to Markham Middle School and El Dorado High School who live on the other side of the footbridge, who walk that path every day. There's syringes, there's pipes, there's apples that they make bongs out of, and my son comes home and brings me this apple and says, "Mom, what is this?" And I have to explain that to my 15-year-old son, which, yeah, he can look it up on YouTube, but he's physically seeing this. And I have nothing against people who need help, but how many of these facilities do we need in a 2-by-2 square mile area? We have enough of it. And there's plenty other places where these people can go that do need help. But this facility, when these people are coming off drugs and alcohol, they need medical care. They go through seizures. They go through psychosis. They need medical care. They're sick. And as they're coming off of alcohol and drugs, they need a 24-hour medical care facility, a doctor who can treat them. And they're not going to get that there. And so what happens when they're going through a full-blown seizure, coming off drugs or alcohol, and they can't get that care, that medical need? There's only so much time that an ambulance can get there. So there's a lot more that goes into this than what we're here talking about. And one is that they need 24-hour medical care for people coming off drugs and alcohol, and our kids. It is not safe for our kids. And I just hope that, like so many people said, if it were in your neighborhood, how would you feel? Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Julie Warren, and I live at 872 Cottage Street. I don't know how many times it needs to be reiterated. I'm going to say the same thing. I don't know if the Pages would move their grandchildren in next to this house. That would be a good question. Some of the recovered people that came up and spoke on their behalf totally trashed our neighborhood. And so if that's what recovered people think of our neighborhood, why would they want to come here? It's just, that is the pathway. I've lived within a mile of this, the circumference for the last 25 years. I've raised my kids here. Obviously, I love it here. But to be so degrading by the recovery people. And then I wanted to make a point that the one recovery facility guy that came up and spoke on their behalf asked that Mr. Olson called them and asked him, could I make a living at this? Which is an interesting question because it seems like it's not so much about the recovery, but a lot of money. Per person, what is paid to the facility seems like a lot of money. It just seems like a money deal to me. And I think that there's a good place outside of the city on Cold Springs Road. There's a little market there that has, it's multi-use. You know, someplace further out there would be better for something like this, where you don't have you know, the elementary kids coming through, the high schoolers coming through, the junior highs coming through. We chose to have our kids in school here because they didn't have to go past facilities like that. It was kind of, it was dreamy. I grew up in Southern California, and on the bus ride, you would see lots of things on your way to school. But that doesn't happen in Placerville, and we'd like to keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, well, I have the impression that everybody who wanted to speak to this issue has had an opportunity to do so. So,
Mr. Chairman, sorry. Mr. Page had his hand up earlier. Don't know if you were going to. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I thought you were going to close public hearing.
So at this time, there's been a lot of testimony. Well, in a nutshell, I think in the interest of fairness, I'm going to ask Mr. Page to come and speak to us for a short time.
Tim Page again. Again, thanks for listening to all of this. I'd like to clear up a few misconceptions. Gee, I would not want to live in the neighborhood these people are telling me about. Everything I've heard tonight regarding drug use, the crime, it has nothing to do with us. We've run a sober living facility there for the last year, and most of these people didn't even know it till the last 2 weeks. We're not Ridgeview Manor. We want nothing to do with Ridgeview Manor. The fence I talked about earlier that we're going to put up, we can only go 6 feet, but it's the 6 feet to close that Ridgeview Manor picture off. Drugs and that kind of things, the gentleman that came up and spoke, I don't know what his name was, the professional, typically drug users aren't going to come visit a rehab facility. It's just not the way it works. The other thing some other things I wanted to clear up, the volunteer staff that we're talking about, it's not someone off the street. Generally, these volunteer staff are working, they're in college and they're trying to get a degree in drug and alcohol counseling, and part of that in California is 2,080 hours of intern, unpaid intern. The way we're trying to staff our facility, when we find an intern that we think is exceptional, we are going to try and pay them and try and get them to come back and work as staff. Might work, might not work. And I keep hearing about all these facilities. To my knowledge, we're the only facility in the neighborhood like this. We've done the research. If they're in the neighborhood, they are not licensed by the state of California. They are not certified. They will come out and certify us. The fire department's already come out and told us what we had to do. We've had to change every doorknob in our facility, including the bathrooms. Every one to meet the code for the fire department. Part of being licensed and certified. Emergency lighting. it goes on and on. It's not something that you want to go into without some money in advance. We're not a detox facility. I understand completely. I have personal knowledge of detoxing on drugs and alcohol. That requires medical supervision. We are not a medical facility whatsoever. That's part of our screening when the people come there, part of the questionnaire that they fill out when they come in. We're not detox. We do not have doctors on staff. We know exactly what those people are going through, and they won't be at our place. Can't be. I mean, that's life and death stuff. Oh, one more thing, the money part. Being a nonprofit, our books are open. They're open now, but we don't have any money in there. Once we get up and running, just like every nonprofit, their tax returns are available to see. All of the profits, all of the staff salaries are all available. When you house people 24/7 and supply everything for them, $3,500 seems like a huge amount of money. We have 10 beds. Of course, at least one of them is going to be free because that's staff. If we have 9 beds in there, that's almost $35,000 a year. With that $35,000 a year, we have to, excuse me, a month. I'm sorry. $35,000 a month, which sounds like an exorbitant amount of money to run a 9-bed treatment facility. It's not. If it was, there'd be, these places would be popping up everywhere.
Mr. Page has the floor, folks.
I'm done, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Well, this brings to a close our public hearing portion of the meeting. Next up, Member Friend is going to engage in a bit of dialogue with our Chief of Police. And so you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's not quite so ominous as that, Chief. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion and reporting and concern about crime and illicit activities in this whole area. And I have to admit, it didn't occur to me when I was first reading the report, but afterwards, it seems that there should have been something in the staff report, and I was just kind of hoping, and I wonder if the police department has a recommendation one way or the other on this proposal, and if you could speak to the general area, et cetera, and provide a few words for the commission and for the public. Thank you.
Yes, sir. The police department's often looped in, if you will, on these sorts of things. That said, it usually comes through, we take a quick look, and it depends on what it is. Some things we're more familiar with than others. This one, we were made aware of. I discussed it briefly with the Development of Services Director, Pierre Rivas, and he said there would be something coming forward. I also received some phone calls from some citizens regarding this, and I referred them down to the Development of Services. However, because of the phone calls I got, I wanted to take a closer look. So I was, and then I wanted to come here this evening to be better educated, because I think and I'm glad I came, because I think there's a lot of information on both sides here. I think I can probably, unfortunately, muddy it up and validate both sides somewhat. The property at 2986, which is the one in question, I pulled data going back approximately 14 years, and but I'll just speak to the recent. There's a call here and there. It looks like there were quite a few in 2006. I know that's not the topic here, but in 2010 there was one, 2011 one, 2012 and 13 there was 2 years without a call at that residence. This year we've been out there twice so far. So there was a 2-year gap. We have been out there twice. Now, as far as the area, and that's by the address, I don't know if that's a call initiated from there or not. One was a civil report, and one was a harassment report. The prior one was an open door, which was likely a burglary or an alarm call or something like that. To speak to the area, I tried to concentrate on a smaller time period. So I looked at the last well, actually, staff helped me quite a bit. Looked at the last 18 months. And in that general area of Coloma, the count was, in the last 18 months, was about 325 calls for service. I would call that significant. But you know, granted, a lot of these are they're a whole variety. These aren't all crime reports. Some of these are assists. Some of these are, you know, stranded motorists or whatnot. Out of the 325, I looked closer at most of the, or more specifically at that area of 2980, 20, you know, in that vicinity, that direct area within a, you know, the Ridgeview Manor and whatnot. And there were 67 calls for service specific to that area. So roughly, and we're talking Coloma to, gosh, all of Coloma, generally a reporting district area, which is a decent size, you know, neighborhood. So 21% of our calls for service were directly in the vicinity of Ridgeview Manor. So that, I'm sure you've heard that. I'm not telling you anything you haven't heard. Now, as far as the most prevalent call we respond to in that immediate vicinity, it's hands down disturbances, and 46% of our disturbance calls in that area are Ridgeview Manor and right in that vicinity. And when they speak of people going through in different directions, I've heard the same stories from the officers and the narcotics infestations and whatnot. So those are anecdotally validated. Now, as far as what I didn't know, and I was educated when I came here, was the map, and I think you also saw it with the sprinkling of sort of these facilities. That maybe it brings a question to my mind. You know, what are they? Are they in fact transitional housing? Are they just a bad house in the neighborhood or whatnot? And so to that, I would have to say I would need to do more research and figure out what's going on there. But at first appearance, it does look, I mean, I think the argument of sort of a saturation, if I was going to look at it and view, in terms of the way we view ABC licensing, we look at the public necessity and convenience, and what we look at is undue saturation. And you know, again, I'd have to validate that, but looking at that, it does concern me that there is an undue saturation of this specific type of activity in a residential area. But again, that would require some more research on our part, on my part. The state code brings the question to mind of more research. I'm curious, I think one of the commissioners made the comment about, is there a square footage requirement? I think that's very interesting to me. I'd have to look into that. Health and safety, is there a requirement? Can you put 10 people in does it require certain things? Obviously 10 people in a 1,920 square foot building, I don't know if that's too much. I don't know, but definitely would put a pressure on, I would think, your utilities and whatnot, water, sewer, everything else. And but again, I'm not an expert in that area. As far as conditions, I know you guys have the flexibility or discretion for conditions. I guess I could sum it up like this. Based on what I've heard and what I've seen, I don't know that I'm comfortable supporting this at this point. Now, that said, if you were to proceed with this, I think just some quick recommendations down and dirty without having all the information at my fingertips, I would ask that you would consider something along the lines of, to the concerns of the citizens, maybe private security there at nighttime, or perhaps one security guard, something to provide that security and peace of mind. And I'm sure it'd be a nominal expense. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not on the business side of it. I would consider that, because I do agree with some of the comments that the volunteer aspect of it could be challenging. I think that I made some notes here, in the event that this was something continued, that I could go back and look at some more data. I don't know if that's where you guys intend to, it's ultimately up to you guys. So that's my quick input.
Thank you very much for that. I think that's very helpful. I have a question. Are you aware if there's an active neighborhood watch program in this area? Do you know offhand?
Well, these folks could probably answer me bad. I think
well, good. Okay, so I mean,
active versus non-active, but
and I can only say I come from a neighborhood where it probably is not as organized as it used to be, but the neighbors do. Everybody knows and watches out and takes care of it. I think that's a big part of that. That's really an aside from this, but just as a question. Again, thank you for your comments, Chief. I think that was very, very helpful.
So I guess it's back for discussion among the commission members. So
I just want to make just a couple of straight up observations before we even get into deliberations. And Mr. Page, first of all, I want to those folks that came forward and admitted, their addictions and their recovery, I want to extend an acknowledgement and good luck to you moving forward, and I hope you can continue that. It's a daunting challenge to overcome, and many people are not successful in doing that. Mr. Page, you have sat through and listened through, I'm sure, what had to be at times fairly uncomfortable comments and remarks and testimony, and in fact, some of them I thought, if I'd been sitting in the chairman's chair, I might have interrupted. But I appreciate your passion. I appreciate where you have come from, and I recognize, at least in the spirit of what it is that you're attempting to do. And I didn't want that to go without acknowledgement, because I think it is really important work. There are people in our community for who, for whatever reason, have made bad choices or bad situations, and it's a really wicked problem that we have with these folks, as well as the homeless and other things, between drug abuse and mental illness and other things. It really it's a community challenge, and not just for Placerville, for everyone. And there are no really easy solutions. And we can look at the whole Broadway situation and the concerns that we have there as well. And we still have these people that have to be somehow not dealt with, may sound like the wrong word, but we have to figure out a solution to this, and I don't know what that is. So I just want to start with that. That's my tone for opening the discussion. I'll yield to my fellow commissioners for the time being. I have other comments.
In regards to a letter that was given asking why would the city of Placerville do this, this is really being dictated to us from the state legislature. So just want everyone to realize that, and elections have consequences. So if you don't like what's being given to you, you might want to consider a different route. At this point, I'm kind of leaning towards, by right, they can do 6 beds. Let them see if, no one can stop them. Let them see if they can go for a year and be a good neighbor, see how harmonious it can run, and then they can come back and ask for the additional beds instead of just going out, great guns, okay, here you go, let's hope it works. That's kind of where I'm leaning.
I spent most of my career working with high school kids, and it would have been real nice if the only ones I had to work with are the ones that really wanted to be there. But that's not a choice we have. We have a community made up of all kinds of people. And there are things that happen in my neighborhood that I'm sure you wouldn't like either. And I don't like it. And I know that this is not the kind of situation we like to be in. We're kind of on the spot. And we're gonna have to come up with some kind of solution to this. And I'm kind of agreeing with you. I think that starting off with a smaller number and seeing the effects of that, and then coming back may be the direction that we need to go.
Well, listening to the testimony, I heard a lot of conflating this facility with pre-existing conditions in the neighborhood. And that is in no way to dispute the validity of those comments. I have the distinct impression that we have a neighborhood that by some definitions could be called impacted. There's evidence of a higher than average number of calls of service in particular locations. I wouldn't dream of disputing anyone's testimony about their personal experiences around what seems to be a certainly more than average amount of drug activity and the follow-on property crimes activity related to that. So I don't dispute the merits of a 10-bed facility in this neighborhood, but given this current state of at least the residents' impression of their neighborhood, it may be that a 6-bed pilot, and as Michael told you, we're silent on that. That's not, 6 beds or less is outside our purview. So, I'm beginning to concur with my two partners here. I would finally say that you have a bunch of people from the neighborhood in the room right now. What better time than at the conclusion of this meeting to talk amongst yourselves about taking your neighborhood back or starting a neighborhood watch program. Mike and I live in the same neighborhood. We participate in the same neighborhood watch program. So I guess the next move is to bring it to a vote. Are we prepared to bring it to a vote?
Mr. Chairman, I have a few additional comments, if I may.
Thank you.
And on, as I always do, and on your last comment, Chief, I might suggest for National Night Out that, just as an idea, perhaps the department target this particular neighborhood for some focused effort for National Night Out, and maybe to help get things kind of motivated. Just throwing that out there. I want to go back, something I've actually kind of learned something this evening. I think I've got this right. Andrew will correct me if I've got it wrong. And for everyone, realizing that this whole issue with community care facilities and the change in the zoning is relatively new. I think for us, we just went through this about 2 meetings ago and made a recommendation to council. The the providing of care for 6 individuals or less still requires a conditional use permit, right? I'm correct on that? It's not by right, it's not automatic. If I'm reading this correctly, it's as a conditional use, or allowed as a conditional use. So you still have to have a CUP to do that, do you not?
No,
the interpretation that staff would have on that regard would be, it's the first in line would be right, by right. Subsequent requests would require conditional uses if they're within 1,000 square feet.
7 or more.
7 or more, correct.
7 or more.
Or 6 or fewer.
Okay.
Actually, there would be no distinction. It could be 6 or fewer.
All right, that's why the 6 is, okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, that doesn't help me. But I'll start off with this. If this proposal was coming to me just by itself, and there were no other mitigating factors, there were no other facilities in the vicinity, there was no issue with crime and drug, et cetera, the conditions that I would put on this request would be as follows. You would have to be a resident of the facility, number one. I would not recommend approving more than 9 beds because there would have to be at least 1 dedicated for staff. I would not accept volunteers to be in charge at any time. I would require 24/7, paid maybe the wrong term, but an official of the organization. Realize I kind of view these interns as maybe, these volunteers as interns. Learning to get working to get their certification through college, if I understood that correctly. And I would probably only grant this on a 6-month renewal basis if that's permissible. I don't know if I'm allowed that short of a period. To me, the value, the potential impact, and the other point I want to make is you've been operating a 6-person facility for quite some time, and with no complaints. And I think that kind of got lost in the whole discussion. Part of what I've heard this evening, and I feel it, and I think it's got some merit. I think people are tired, and people are worn out, and it's really almost the straw breaking the camel's back. And the risk to them and their property values and their quality of life is really significant, frankly. And I think you're bringing this project in with just everything else that's going on, and the timing is bad. And I think it's difficult to parse through the types of folks that are going to be taken care of here and what that is exactly going to look like and what is the risk. And I think people don't really know what the risk is. I'm probably going, if a motion is made to, well, frankly, we don't even need a motion from us to do what you want to do for 6 persons or less, frankly. You can just go and do it. And I realize that doesn't pencil out. And I think I would tend to support that. I'm going to throw another concept out to you. And I'm going to try to tug at your passion, which I think is genuine. And you see, if Placerville had any kind of industrial area, which we don't really, there's no real industrial area where you could have manufacturing and other things that, where you're not retail servicing people, we have people come in and kinds of things like a bakery or whatnot. If we had something like that, and I'm saying that because I don't want to punt this to the county, that's kind of where I'm going. But if we had some kind of industrial area, I would float an idea to you. What if you thought about selling the property and then taking that money and then opening the facility in, say, an industrial or other place? The comment was made more than once, and I think it was correct. The right setting and the right management. And what you're proposing just doesn't strike me as being a good fit for the residential area. And frankly, a lot of the concentration, I think that's something we're going to have to take a look at, because I do think there is a cumulative impact. And I think Sacramento does a real disservice to communities. Look at all the effort we put somebody through to change some freaking windows in the historic district, and we have no say-so whatsoever about the potential impact of these facilities. And it's not to speak negative against the folks that need the help, but you can overly concentrate them. And what is the fair burden of any given neighborhood to balance this? And again, it's a real difficult problem, and our hands are tied in a large part by what is dictated to us out of Sacramento. So I would just throw that out. If you give some thought, man, you could do that, and you could achieve your dream of helping people to get where you are now from what you've been through, and you can do it in a way that might work. And I'm sorry that, again, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I don't think I can support this scope of this project in this neighborhood this way. That's all I have to say, Mr. Chairman.
Are we ready to call the question, guys? Okay.
I'm open to friendly amendments, so don't take anything personally. I would move that we would conceptually deny conditional use permit 2014-03, continuing until the next commission meeting, and direct staff to return with a review of other potential community care facilities within the 1,000 feet of the proposed site and provide a list of potential findings.
I'm going to second that simply for the sake of discussion, but I will admit that I don't entirely understand what you're trying to get at. I won't say I don't understand the motion. So the actions are, we can just outright deny the request, and I believe that it's appealable. Is that correct, Andrew? It'd be appealable to City Council if we deny the request?
Yes.
Okay, so that can be directly appealed. They can go straight to council. We can postpone a decision on this and actually we'd continue it to the next regular meeting or to a date certain, 90 days, whatever, and you would direct staff to come up with some information if that's kind of what your motion was, or we could approve the request. So it seems to me those are the three options that we have right now. If we deny the request, they have two choices. They can just operate as a 6-bed facility, or they can appeal to City Council to go for 7 or more.
Yeah, my only feeling on that was that we should have some legitimate findings to put behind a denial. That was, so my motion was asking to continue it, have a review. If there's other facilities in the 1,000 feet, which then would not allow it, it would be a legitimate finding to say no to the conditional use permit.
The only challenge with that is anyone can operate a 6 or less, and we don't have to have any knowledge. There'd be no knowledge of that, right? I'm not sure what the licensing requirements are from the state. We've heard some suggestion that there has to be licensing, but the city would have no knowledge of 6 or less, right? Because it doesn't have to come before the city. I could make the finding that there is a disproportionate density. Well, I would make the finding that the request for 10. How would I do this? Request for 10 would represent a disproportionate density of treatment residents in an area that already seems to have preponderance of other facilities. We have them by name, regardless of what they're doing. We have environmental alternatives, youth transitional, we have Progress House, we have additional 6-bed facilities. I don't think we can use that treehouse ministry, so I mean we could probably make findings that way.
Progress House is not a live-in, not a residence.
Right.
Okay, so that's the problem with the information we have. We don't have enough, we don't know enough details about these other facilities in that area to say it's too dense.
So my suggestion is that given the facts we have on the ground in front of us at this moment, I'm very much not in favor of continuing this. So given the facts, opinions, and a sense of a neighborhood, I would be prepared to move that we deny this conditional use permit application.
Would somebody want to offer an amendment to my previous motion to continue?
It might be easier for you just to withdraw the motion. It might be, and we can start all over again. I need you to restate the motion. I'll say that much. Sorry.
Mr. Painter?
Yeah, staff is kind of confused too, because I believe Member Drobish mentioned to deny the CUP request was the nature of the motion, but then to have staff return to this body at a subsequent meeting with findings for denial. If that was the intent, but that's not what I heard subsequent to that, was that you had changed that language to continue the CUP request to the next. So staff was confused. Which one? What is the current status of the?
Is everyone fine with me withdrawing my motion?
Not that Jerry put his off.
Okay. The slate is clean.
Yeah.
I would move to deny conditional use permit 2014-03.
Second.
Do you want to attach any findings to this denial? I mean, I think going to Roman numeral 2B, I think it could be argued that the granting of this permit could in fact be materially detrimental to the public health and safety within the vicinity as defined in the immediate location of the residential facility due to the existence of other facilities and the disproportionate concentration of residential care facilities and treatment. So I think the finding could be attached to 2B.
I think the evidence for that finding in that manner is pretty thin. We don't have a record of this facility operating in the particular capacity it's operating in. My thinking on this, again, is that we have a situation where many of the issues raised by the people in the neighborhood admittedly conflate existing issues with what we really don't know yet about what this facility, how this facility might impact the neighborhood. That said, we have what I believe is a neighborhood with genuine concerns, and so for me, it almost becomes a question of should it be here, should it be now? I mean, in the you know, in the ivory tower sense, we could simply evaluate what we're hearing about this facility and not conflate it with what's happening with other facilities and what's happening with an SRO that's desperately in need of, I would call it accelerated or increased enforcement. So again, my preference is to simply deny this application. The applicant has an appeal process. The applicant, yes, Andrew.
No, I'll wait till you. I'm sorry to.
Okay.
Yeah, wait till you're finished.
You know, actually, thank you.
I'd like to speak directly to the chairman's desire, though, to simply deny without findings. And here's why I think this is important. It's important for precedent. So, yes, if we deny their request, one of two things are going to happen. They're either going to appeal it to City Council, and they can say, well, the findings were weak. Fair enough. We had at least had some findings. Or they'll move on with simply a 6-bed. But I'll add some additional findings, I think, that are objective, because I simply think from a precedent standpoint, it's always best to attach findings to a denial. So, you know, otherwise it'll come back to bite us. It's arbitrary. So the other findings that I would add, then, if you want to consider, I would add.
Let me just say that I'm always happy and grateful to defer to your decades of more experience than I have in this.
All right, let's not get nasty. So I would add as findings then, it'd be an amendment to the motion, I would add findings that the application, the proposal as submitted by the applicant was we found to be deficient in terms of the ability to monitor on a 24/7 basis the residents in the facility. And there was one other thing that I found, one other thing. Well, I'll leave it with that one until I can find the other one.
Would that need to be worded in a? Would that staff? I could see that.
Yeah, I've been kind of wanting to speak for the last couple of minutes now. I see you're kind of struggling with generating findings, and from staff's perspective, findings I think are integral to any conditional use permit, any discretionary action that you're taking. That would be staff's quasi-legal opinion on that. To adopt a motion without findings, I think would not do this body a very good service. Staff would offer a very, in fact, it kind of dovetails with what the original motion by member Drobish mentioned, but was withdrawn, requesting staff come back to this body with a list of findings for you to consider, with the caveat that you've already addressed or at least raised a motion to deny the request, but the actual request vote would occur upon acceptance of the findings at the next meeting. That would allow us all, due to the lateness of the hour, to come back to this room, discuss perhaps the findings, whether you agree or disagree, and then choose to adopt them or not. So staff would certainly be willing to do that at a subsequent meeting.
That was what I was thinking.
I think that's kind of what you
My original motion was to conceptually deny it, come back with some findings at a future date.
Is that a motion?
I think
I believe there's a motion and a second, so it would have to be somebody offering an amendment for me to change my motion.
I'm lost in terms of where we're at because we withdrew one
Straight up
motion.
denial.
Yeah,
with no findings, somebody would
Oh,
have
that's
to
right.
offer
Take
an
that back.
amendment with.
Who seconded your?
I think
Okay, that's right.
the chairman did.
Yes.
So we need to amend the motion on the table to include direct staff to bring back findings sufficient to support the commission's denial of the request.
Or the option is to laboriously go through some findings.
So that'd be
tonight.
the amendment, which I would offer, a friendly amendment.
I accept that amendment.
Do I have to second it? Okay, I second the acceptance of the amendment.
I'm just taking some notes here. Hold on. Mr. Chairman, would you like me to call the roll?
Yeah, please, roll call vote, please.
Vice Chair Drobish.
Aye.
Chair Lowry.
Aye.
Member List. Aye. Member Friend.
Aye. Question for staff, if I may. So this is not appealable until such times as you bring back findings that we adopt. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, we still have a little more business, whether you're not, you're free to go, of course, just to, yeah, you're free to stay and watch democracy at work. What has happened is we have voted to continue this hearing until we've gotten further information from staff, and when we reconvene, probably not on the 17th, or will it be on the 17th?
That's correct. We are not anticipating having a meeting on the 17th.
Okay.
Okay. Staff will not be present, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then there's that. Okay, well then there'll be a notification on the city website.
Yes.
Okay, there'll be a notification when we are going to take this issue up again.
There'll be a public hearing.
There'll be another
with
public
that.
hearing and basically much the same as you saw this evening. We'll be taking input from staff as requested, as we were earlier asked for. Does that make sense to you? Do you have any questions? The next meeting is the 17th. It's scheduled to be the 17th. It's not happening.
It'll be the first meeting. I don't have a calendar in front of me. The first meeting in July.
Okay, so first Tuesday in July. Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, so do we have any matters from commissioners and staff?
Staff has an announcement. What I couldn't remember earlier in the evening, it is the Pony Express ride, which is, I've given you an outline of what's going to happen, and that's coming up. It's a week or so from today, and they are coming through town. It looks like it's going to be on June 11th at the Chamber of Commerce, just across the street here, at about 7 o'clock. So certainly that's a public event. Public's encouraged to come down and attend and watch that procession. I already mentioned the 17th is we're not going to have a meeting. I can give you a brief update on the zone change stuff that came to you previously. It's circulating around and waiting for a particular meeting at the discretion of the city manager and my director. So I don't know when council's going to hear those actions. It's likely to be very soon, but I couldn't give you a definitive date at this time. I don't think we need any of you in attendance unless you feel it's warranted. But I don't think there was enough discussion either or to warrant really having a member there. But you are certainly free to do so. That's all I got due to the lateness of the hour, and I haven't had dinner.
Okay. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
I just want. Yeah. Mr. Painter, did you get to attend that CEQA conference?
Oh yes, I did. I did. Excellent. Stanford has lots of money. We don't have a lot of money. What they can do down there is amazing, and I know it has to do with economics, but yeah, the conference was fantastic. If you ever get a chance to go to a California Preservation Foundation event, they do a great job. They bring in very top-notch people with real-world knowledge and experience and background, and they're always willing to answer questions and stay after, and it was really well done.
Thank you for going.
Quickly, I will not be here for the July 2nd. Is that July 1? I believe it's July 1. I will not be here for that meeting. I'm out of town. 2, we have the wagon train coming through on Saturday, big party on Main Street, and then ending up down by, I think, the movie theater. And then, in light of tonight's discussion, invite everyone to the Bell Tower Brewfest on June 28th, Saturday. So, don't know how else to put that. So, but
there's no resentment.
Yeah.
Yeah, timing.
Okay, so would someone like to move to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second. Okay.
All in favor? Aye.